Well, good morning, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone to the first national event for the Strong, Prosperous, and Resilient Communities Challenge, or SPARCC. I feel that way too. SPARCC is a 3-year, $90 million initiative to ensure that the way we build our places benefits everyone. My name is Brian Prater, and I'm with the Low Income Investment Fund, one of the implementing partners of SPARCC. On behalf of everyone involved in SPARCC, I want to thank you for coming out today to share this day. We are very pleased to be at the Schomburg Center in New York City, which is a National Historic Landmark. For more than 90 years, the center has collected critical documents and materials and offered educational programs and fellowships to advance people's understanding of the global Black experience. Before we get started with the program today, I would like to acknowledge some of the key partners in our work. First, I would like to introduce the other implementing partners. They are Enterprise Community Partners, the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and of course, LIF, where I work. Secondly, all of the partners would like to say a special thank you to all of our funders who spent a considerable amount of time with us co-creating this initiative. The funders are the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, the JPB Foundation, and the California Endowment. Finally, I would like to extend a very warm welcome and recognize the teams from the 6 regions from around the country who will be our partners in this work for the next 3 years. Those regions are Atlanta, the Bay Area, Chicago, Denver, Los Angeles, and Memphis. How about a round of applause for them? So we have a very full agenda today. You'll hear from each of the 6 sites that I just mentioned, and we have 3 great panels that are going to explore the intersection of racial equity, health, and climate change. But first, to introduce you to SPARCC, the partners and sites have created a brief video that shares what brought us together, why we think it's so important at this point in time, and what we're going to be doing for the next 3 years. Our goal in SPARCC is to support our site partners in their quest to change their places, but also to influence how we as a country think about this work, squarely putting equity and race in the center of all that we do. The video, please. Roll it.
We believe that place matters, that it's a fundamental building block for healthy.
We have a bold opportunity to do things differently.
We have to look at decision-making through the 3 lenses of equity, climate, and health.
We need to know that we're making a difference. We need to know that now is a time where national level conversation and organizing is crucial.
How can we change the tide, and how can we build a strong community once again?
SPARCC is a collaboration among very unique partners to show that when we invest in our communities, we can ensure that everyone is thriving.
We, as partners, had seen a lot of great collaborative work, and we felt it was a type of work that we would really want to elevate.
SPARCC shows the community that somebody else is thinking about the same problems that we're thinking about and thinking about it on a bigger level, giving us a platform to be able to go and make big changes.
SPARCC is bringing together the different components that people interact with on a daily basis in order to really strengthen the whole ecosystem and have the supports that people need to thrive.
We couldn't leave communities, especially regions with plans developed, and have them sit on a shelf. So we knew we could be part of that opportunity to get those plans off the shelf and move them forward.
In many of these communities, they've been doing this work for years, but with limited resources, limited access to dollars. And this is a 3-year, $90 million initiative looking at systems change across the country.
We have infrastructure that's a huge asset. Many regions would die for our transit system, but it's very stark to see that, particularly in communities of color, we haven't seen development happen. And in communities where development's happening, it's rapid and gentrification is happening. And so getting ahead of that and figuring out how to ensure that people are able to take advantage of something that connects them. If we don't capture this moment in time, it could easily go away.
Denver has a goal to reduce climate change, and there's all different kinds of people that are working together on these goals. How do we bring renewable energy and accessible energy to new communities? How do we ensure that people can afford energy and that they have access to all the programs that are being created? We've been looking at this not just as an energy issue, but a housing issue, a health issue, and a community issue. And when you have everybody at the table talking about it, that's where we've seen the most success.
We have 2 Atlantas right now, and it's been 2 Atlantas for quite a while. Benefits are happening for people that are living along the Beltline and people that are in the city of Atlanta. We're seeing an economic boom. We need to make sure that boom has a balance to it, that it has equity, that we can, pivot some of that towards the areas that need it the most. If we don't do anything about it now, it's going to continue to fester.
Here in the Bay Area, as in many places around the country, we're actually seeing significant housing crisis. Over the years, we have fought to strengthen eviction protection, we've fought to strengthen rent stabilization for low-income people, and these are the policy solutions that we feel are incredibly important, because the solution is not just to help individual families, but to help big groups of folks.
North Memphis is a poverty-stricken area. Senior citizens have to make a choice between food or the medication. Also, you have children that have asthma because they're living in molded houses. If we're going to be a community about all people, that needs to change.
LA is at a crossroads right now. We're getting our transit built out. A lot of new development is coming in, and we have a choice to make. Develop the city for the higher income population, or prioritize solutions so that development can be for everyone. SPARCC is changing the way that we think about community development. It is once and for all moving us to a place where our work is community informed and community driven.
By re-envisioning how to think about the decisions and the investments that go into a place, we can begin to reduce the growing gap around inequality.
We need to address the way that we build in our communities. And SPARCC is really the right set of solutions for today's problems.
I love that video. Good morning, everyone. I'm Shelley Potisha. I'm with the Natural Resources Defense Council, where I lead the Urban Solutions Program. And I am really pleased to be bringing the environmental community to the places that we all live. Our commitment to strong and just and resilient communities is unwavering, and it is a big priority for us. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Risa Lavizzo-Mourey, President and CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Risa is widely recognized as one of the most important thought leaders today, helping us to really see that building a culture of health in America is essential to improving all lives. Her leadership at the foundation, through research and partnerships and investing in solutions, has helped us see that your zip code is more important than your genetic code in determining your health outcomes. And that is really transformative. The culture of health framing that she has lifted up has shifted the way we think about how we build healthier, more equitable places, and it laid the groundwork for SPARCC. Dr. Lavizzo-Mourey will be stepping down as president at the end of April, and we're going to miss her. That said, I know that she will we will help her carry her vision forward through SPARCC and through all of our work at the local level. Please welcome Risa to the stage.
Wow. And thank you, Shelley and Brian. It is really a delight to be here and to be able to welcome all of you to the start of this incredible initiative. We've got a full house, and it was hard to get people to come in and get started. That's how you know you've got a great program that's being kicked off. And I know that we not only have the people here in this room, but we have people who are live streaming in today. So it is an exciting time. And I couldn't help thinking, Brian, as you were reading off all the partners and funders who've been involved in SPARCC, what an incredible opportunity we have, and how impressive it is that we have so many organizations coming together to work on an important effort. This is not usual. It's very unusual. And therefore, for me, it's a real privilege to be joining forces with so many people and organizations that I really admire to do this work. And it's exciting that we're here doing this, co-creating something at this exciting moment. So I know we've already seen the 6 sites, but we've got to congratulate Atlanta and Denver and Chicago and Los Angeles and Memphis and the Bay Area for what they're doing. So join me in congratulating them. You know, these are the communities that are showing us how to work together so that everyone in their community can thrive. And over the next 3 years, we're going to continue to be inspired by their work, by their creativity, by their commitment to show all of us how to make our communities stronger, more prosperous, healthier, and of course, more resilient. Now, I know that this work is very meaningful to all of you, but I want to just give you a sense of what it means to me personally. I live in Philadelphia, and this is 30th Street Station. Any of you who ride the Northeast Corridor, as I do often, will recognize this as not only an iconic station, but as a place where people are developing it right before our very eyes to be a new transportation and residential and retail hub. Now, there's another train station in Philadelphia. This is the North Philadelphia train station. The train I rode to get here this morning literally sped by this station. And in its day, the North Philadelphia station was a critical part of the commuting hub in that area. It was a symbol of the prosperity of that area. And unlike 30th Street Station, which is booming, the once vibrant North Philadelphia station is struggling. The poverty rate around that area is a staggering 45%. And the life expectancy in that neighborhood is the lowest in Philadelphia. It's 20 years lower than the area right around the Liberty Bell. Now, the underuse and disinvestment in the neighborhood right around the North Philadelphia station is part of the reason that this station is the way it is. And when I ride past it all the time, I often hear the conductor say, "We're just going to pass it by." And Sometimes I hear people joke that you don't want to get off in North Philadelphia. And I cringe knowing what that means for the neighborhood and for the people of that neighborhood. No city, Philadelphia or any other city, can be healthy and prosperous if we're willing to just pass whole neighborhoods by. Now, there's some good news. There are plans now to reinvest in the North Philadelphia station and to build up the housing and retail and manufacturing opportunities. And we know that if that happens, the people in that neighborhood will be healthier. And we should be able to do that. I mean, come on, the infrastructure is already there, right? But you know that redevelopment is more than investing in stores and buildings and housing. It's about people. It's about creating opportunities and hope for people. You heard the reference to zip code earlier. There's no reason why the zip code that someone lives in should determine their access to transportation or good jobs or health or open spaces to enjoy. SPARCC understands that. And if SPARCC is successful, everyone else is going to understand it too. They're going to understand that improving equity and health equity is a critical measure for the investments that we make in infrastructure and redevelopment all across the country. Now, we know that the 6 SPARCC communities are facing some of the most pressing problems that our nation faces. Poverty, lack of safe and affordable housing, transportation, brownfields. And we also know that we're only going to solve this if we come together and work together across sectors, because we can't attack these kinds of challenges without doing it. Now, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to write an essay in a book called Investing in America's Communities, What Works? And I said, one day we're likely to look back and wonder why the health industry and community development were ever separate. And that's why I look out here and see all of you and am incredibly heartened by the fact that we not only have community development professionals here, we not only have people from the health community here, but we have so many other sectors. SPARCC is literally bringing together people who over the past few years have been informed by careful listening about what works and have realized that they are going to step up and demonstrate the courage to break out of the silos that we normally find ourselves in. Because now there's a growing awareness and a rapidly growing research field that demonstrates the connections between health and the many different sectors that influence it. So all of you, the partners, the Low Income Investment Fund, the Federal Reserve Bank from San Francisco, Enterprise, NRDC, you guys get it, and you're coming together. And you're teaching people that equity, climate preparedness is going to be a way that you will continue to differentiate how investment in infrastructure will be focused in the future. So I hope that this program will continue to drive the national conversation about what works in your communities and in all communities. Now, that's our logo. At the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, you know, we've been directing all of our work for the last few years towards a single vision of working alongside people like you to build a comprehensive, sustainable culture of health in America. And I know that you all understand what that means. You know that we mean it's more than simply not being sick, that it's recognizing that health really is an essential part of everything we do. It's the backbone, really, of our prosperity. It's the way we connect, and it's really the bedrock of a competitive and prosperous nation. But I'd like to just call out two core values that drive this vision and that I hope all of us will keep top of mind today as we start this work. The first is the critical importance of achieving health equity. You know, no one knows better than me, a physician, that personal responsibility is a critical part of improving health. But we have to keep in mind that the choices people make depend on the choices that they have. And without access to the basics, good jobs, clean and safe places to live, healthy food, transportation, no hardworking person can make it and become healthy without this. They certainly can't thrive. And I'd also like to point out the importance of having a shared value on health. You know, health means a lot of things to people, and we use different language to talk about health and well-being, particularly when you bring together two different industries as we are today. But we all know that it is critically based on our neighborhoods, our families. It means prioritizing how we think about decisions for ourselves, for our families, how we think about decisions in public policy for communities and neighborhoods. And it means learning to speak a language that's a common language. You know, when we first started coming together, people would hear the acronym CDC, and half of the people would think it's Centers for Disease Control, and the other would think, well, that's Community Development Corporation. So we've got to be mindful that we do speak different languages, and we're going to have to get beyond that if we're going to actually be able to strengthen our communities. So as you heard, I'm in my final weeks as CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and that's caused me to do a lot of reflecting on the lessons that I've learned over the last decade and a half of leading this organization and working with this incredible team of people. And as you embark on this effort, I'd like to just highlight one of those, and that's the importance of bringing together different kinds of partners and diverse partners. And when I look around the room and see the collection of people that we have here, I'm reminded of my favorite line from Hamilton. What are the odds that the gods would put us all in one spot? We have a purpose here. And that's why we've got doctors and bankers and philanthropists and environmentalists all coming together to focus on the well-being and equity of their communities. By joining forces, we really can get it done, and we can show that there are not only opportunities for upward mobility, but there are practical ways to get there. So it's been a privilege to be a part of this. I'm going to be watching this flower bloom, and as Alice Walker would say, bloom gloriously for all of us. But now, let's get to work.
Thank you, Risa. I gotta say, I don't think I ever thought I'd be in this place. It's really exciting to hear all this together. I have a few logistics I want to put out there, and one thing I think we mentioned earlier, that this event is being webcast live. So there are folks all around the country able to join in on this, and I know there were a lot of folks who wanted to be here personally, but couldn't fly across the country to do that. So thank you, folks who are joining in by the webcast. We also really encourage you to join the conversation on Twitter. We're using the hashtag #WeAllThrive, hashtag #WeAllThrive. And then for more information about SPARCC, we have a website, SPARCChub.org. We have a lot of information up there, and it's going to continue to grow over time. Also, we're going to have one break during the program today. It'll be about 15 minutes. For those of you in the auditorium, we're hoping that you'll stay for the lunch reception. But we also have a lot to cover here, so we're going to try to keep that 15-minute break as tight as we possibly can, even though I know you all want to talk to each other. Now I'd like to turn to what's noted in the program as our spotlight sessions. Throughout the program, you're going to be hearing directly from the 6 SPARCC regions about their communities, about their partnerships, and the work that they're embarking on to create opportunity for everyone. And as we've gotten to know the folks in these communities, we've been really inspired by their dedication, their vision, their commitment, their ability to push through when they're really struggling with very tough issues that have been around for a long time. So we're hoping that we want to share some of that with you. And so right now, I'm pleased to introduce the first 2 sites you'll hear from today, Chicago, followed by Denver. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. All right, so my name is Joanna Trotter. This is my colleague, Rosa Ortiz. I'm with the Chicago Community Trust. Rosa's with Enterprise Community Partners, and we're excited and proud to represent the Elevated Chicago team. Elevated Chicago is an expanding and new table that has been, we still have extra slides in here, really built around 2 converging issues. One is, and this group had been meeting for about a year, is that we've got amazing new tools in Chicago that are really looking at how we unlock the value of our existing transit system. We've got a new TOD ordinance, we have new financing, we have new opportunities, but the challenge is we can't seem to plant that on the ground. We have communities that are still grappling with disinvestment, where you will go to a train station and there'll be 4 vacant lots around that station. And then communities where we're actually seeing very transit-dependent populations that are being pressured out because of gentrification and market pressures. And so a group had been convening to say, what can we do about this? What kind of tools do we need to provide to really unlock the potential of these stations and all of this nexus in terms of what transit can mean for us as a city and as a region. At the same time, swirling around us was an increased conversation and call to action around racial inequality in our region broadly, both in the city of Chicago itself as a region as a whole. And that's fueled by a few things. Number one, the Laquan McDonald video and shooting, which really put us on the national scene in terms of police accountability and equities in that way. We've got new research that really starts to quantify challenges what we're calling opportunity youth. So communities where up to 70% of young African American men ages 16 to 26 are unemployed. We've got a new health plan, Healthy Chicago 2.0, that puts equity and social determinants of health front and center in the way that we're going to address public health issues facing our city. So all of those opportunities were swirling around us, and what SPARCC allowed us to do is start to converge this. So we know segregation is spatial. We know that what we can grapple with is very tangible, sort of station area work where we can unlock the potential of transit to build community and connect community. And so that's really what Elevated Chicago is all about. Recently, and many of you may have just seen this, on Tuesday, one of our partners, the Metropolitan Planning Council, in partnership with the Urban Institute, just released the cost of segregation study. We all know that Chicago, the city itself, is segregated. This actually quantifies our regional segregation and compares it to the 100 largest regions in the country. What it found is that we're the 5th most racially and economically segregated region in the country, and what that's costing us is $4.4 billion in lost income, particularly for African American households. It's costing us $8 billion in lost GDP. And if we were to move in terms of becoming less segregated on the spectrum to the median across the 100 largest regions, we'd actually have a 30% decrease in homicide rates. So we'd literally save lives. These maps here, one is a look at the Economic Hardship Index for the City of Chicago. The other is the Child Opportunity Index. Both of these are tools that we've used in our Healthy Chicago 2.0 plan. What you need to know is red is not good, blue is good. And we have chosen communities that we want to work with that are transit accessible, but represent both types, right? We want to make sure that people stay in place in areas of opportunity, but that we use transit as a way to create opportunity in communities where that opportunity doesn't exist at the level it needs to exist. So we're focusing on the north side, and we'll talk specifically about two of these communities on two areas of the west side and then on the south side of Chicago. And the other piece when we think about the connections to transit again, if you look, this is going west, so these are some of the west side communities that we're working in. Here on the east side is the downtown Chicago area. Farther west is more affluent suburbs of Oak Park, River Forest. Smack dab in the middle are the communities we're working with. So when we talk about life expectancy, you see in the loop, 85 years. Oak Park, River Forest, above 81 years. And then right in the middle, we're a full 15 years less in terms of life expectancy. So you can see how this disparity actually carries out through our transit system.
Great. That being said, Elevated Chicago is really thinking about two types of communities. One of the communities is really thinking about those communities that are experiencing rapid gentrification. And the other kind of communities are communities that really can benefit from growth investment. And so this particular picture that you have up here, it's beautiful, right? It's a wonderful amenity. It is a picture of the 606 Trail. And it is a wonderful amenity that is very recent that is a great asset for Logan Square. Except one of the unintended sort of impacts that it has caused is that it has actually increased the cost of homes by 50%. And so what that means is that the residents of that community, the homeowners or longtime renters, as well as small businesses, are now being heavily impacted by the changes that come with those changes in prices as well. So that's one of the communities. Joanna will share a little bit more about those communities that need or that can benefit from growth investment.
So let's jog south on the green line. We have a similar catalytic opportunity on the south side of Chicago. I don't know if you all recognize these two folks. So we won the bid to get the Obama Presidential Library, the center. We're all very excited for that. The question at hand is, these are communities that have dealt with disinvestment for decades, communities of color. We all want to see transformation happen. The question is, how do we make that inclusive transformation? How do we learn the lessons from what's happened around the 606 and build the infrastructure early on to make sure not only are we keeping people in place, but as the boat rises, all boats are rising together. So in terms of economic opportunity, jobs, procurement opportunities, that we're making sure that residents and small business owners in the neighborhoods surrounding the center actually benefit from that. But I think also more importantly is as we, and similar to SPARCC, as we looked at the communities we wanted to work with, it wasn't just data. We actually wanted to work with communities and organizations and people who were already doing this work, who already recognized the connections. Bernard Lloyd is a perfect example of this. He's a recovering consultant turned developer based out of Bronzeville. Bronzeville's Chicago's historic Black Belt. 51st Street is where he's working. His vision is to create this concept around a cuisine of the African diaspora. He wants to create a restaurant row. He's got a green roof. He's got a food incubator. On the vacant lots surrounding that he owns, he's created a bike box where people can come together, repair their bikes, and do these great bike tours. He's got a community garden. It has taken Bernard 15 years. He's got one restaurant open. One of the challenges, as he was dealing with all the city financing and pulling that all together, the housing crash happened. So the entrepreneurs he was working with lost all their equity in the housing crash. We need it to be easier for Bernard to do his work. And then finally, if we just jog one station to the south over Bernard's working on 51st, we get to Garfield Boulevard. One of our other partners, Arts and Public Life, led by Fiastra Gates in partnership with the University of Chicago, is creating an arts block. The concept here is that we really want to replicate what he's doing or think about the model he's created as a way to do culturally driven neighborhood change. So with that, I'm going to quickly show a video that just talks a bit about the work that they're doing. Cue that up.
The Green Line Art Center is a bit of an innovation. Artists who are interested in cinema, theater, and dance will have a space where they can workshop and incubate their ambitious projects. In many ways, the Green Line Art Center was born out of my desire to not just meet the needs of visual artists, but also really think about the city who want to do work on the South Side or who live on the South Side.
It's kind of an adaptive reuse project that will, kind of continue the development of this block in a really thoughtful way.
Now you look at the cafe and the bookstore, you look at the rest of the arts block that's coming. It's encouraging people to start paying attention to Washington Park again.
There's great value
go ahead
in
and stop the video there.
A space dedicated to performance art practice on the South Side of Chicago, because really there isn't one. And we recognize.
Thank you. So, as a resident of one of the focus communities, I am honored and committed to make sure that our work includes racial equity, environmental justice, community arts and culture, as well as making sure that our health, I think I mentioned that one, right? Environmental justice, racial equity, health, and arts and culture are all absolutely there. And we have a magnificent team, those at the table, but also everyone here at the table. So thank you for being part of this effort. We know we can really make a difference. And we really want to leverage our existing train system to connect communities, because we realize that as a city itself, as a region, we really need to connect within the communities that we are working with, as well as throughout the communities connected through our transit system. So with that said, how are we going to get that done, right? It's very simple. Not really. But we really want to make sure that we are embracing community and stakeholder ownership. It's everything about engaging the residents as well as community institutions, as well as our government, both city and other institutions that serve our entire region. The other piece that we want to do is definitely make sure that we have clear and specific programs and projects that will make an impact, a physical impact throughout our work. And last but not least, we want to make sure that those lessons that we are learning within each of the different typologies, communities, and efforts that we are experiencing are actually built in a way that they can be replicated. Because these communities that we are working with are not just one-offs. They are communities that we know are very similar to other areas within our city, but also, as we've seen throughout the days, that is also very similar to other cities and communities throughout our country. So with that said, we know that the road might not always be easy, but we do recognize that we can make a difference, and that our partnership has really never been more timely and really has never been more meaningful. So we are excited, we're ready to go, and we are thrilled to be partnering with all of you to make this work happen. Thank you.
Okay, deep breath here. It's a real honor to be here today with this esteemed company, including our fellow cohort members. And so on behalf, I'm sorry, I'm pulling up my notes here on, when you depend on technology, this is what happens. On behalf of the other members of our team, my friends from Denver, thank you so much for this opportunity to be here, not only today, but to be a part of this great endeavor. As you may have heard, there's a lot happening in our little cow town. And this slide pretty much epitomizes it all. We have our new Colorado state bird, the Colorado construction crane. And if you come to Denver, you'll see them popping up all over the place. It's a place of great economic investment and development. Our already phenomenal recreation and active living opportunities are increasing every day. Rapid population growth. We have more than 1,100 people a month moving into just the city and county of Denver, let alone the region as a whole. We have increasing home values, and we are in the final stages of the build-out of our rail system that voters voted to fund in 2004 as part of the Fast Tracks initiative. So, this slide pretty much sums up everything that's happening. And a lot of other cities envy our situation, but it doesn't come without consequences. You'll hear this from everybody who talks with you today from the cities, that the number one problem that we're facing right now is gentrification and displacement, and what happens because of that. Higher housing costs, which are forcing many people to reevaluate where they live and how they live. Increased racial and economic segregation. This photo is actually a photo I took 3 blocks from my home. We moved into that neighborhood 20 years ago. It was a neighborhood of great economic and cultural diversity, and that diversity is evaporating before our eyes. Issues around the suburbanization of poverty, in which communities that surround Metro Denver itself are experiencing issues that they never thought they would have to deal with, nor are they equipped to deal with it. The inequitable distribution of infrastructure, and finally, disproportionate health and environmental impacts. All of these are exacerbated by the pace of change, which is just, I can't even describe what that's like when you're in Denver and having to deal with it. And also with this realization came the understanding that these are complex issues. These are not something you deal with sequentially. When you think about infrastructure and displacement, we've been working for years to get bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure into some of our communities where people are walking in streets and risking their very lives just to walk to the school or walk to transit. But what we have learned in just the past few months is once you start putting infrastructure into these communities, you accelerate the pace of gentrification and displacement. So you can't do infrastructure without doing displacement at the same time, or you're just going to work against everything that you're trying to do. So really, the issue that we've been dealing with was the realization that we have to think differently about these issues, and we really don't have the tools to do that, and that's what we're really hoping to accomplish through our participation in this effort. So you're going to see these words pop up in everybody's presentation today. Equity, health, climate resilience, but I think that the key words here in this vision that we hold for the Metro Denver area has to do with the words community informed. Because if the residents from these communities are not part of the process, we are not getting to the heart of the matter. We are not hearing the truth. We cannot make assumptions from outside about what people in communities need. So that really brings us to our first strategy, which is a resident engagement. Part of this is increasing the number of resident leaders. And I can't tell you, you hear all the time about community engagement and community empowerment, but those words do not talk about the real needs. What we need to do is bring those community leaders into the system and make them a part of the process And so this is really what we're focusing on, to ensure that the resident voices are heard in all of the issues and in all of the platforms about displacement and transit accessibility. You know, and in the current social and political environment, that's just getting harder. How do you have a public meeting when people are afraid to come to the meeting if they think that ICE is waiting outside the door as they walk out? So it's not like these issues are getting easier. The second strategy is kind of the grass top strategy, and that is to inform and advocate for change. So we're part of a number of processes that are going on in the Denver area to help advance that. So advancing that through the grass tops by bringing in the people who are working in the communities. And this has to do with a whole host of factors, including renter protection, housing preservation, and local land ownership, even down to working with our transit agency to come up with discounted fares so that people can actually afford to use transit. What a concept. And finally, focusing our efforts in some catalytic areas from which we can learn and take those lessons throughout the Denver area. So that includes working through efforts that we've begun in association with a lot of people in this room and coming up with a pipeline of projects that are fundable and bring funders to the table, identifying priority projects that meet the needs of neighborhood residents, and finalizing structures of community investment so the money can actually flow in and do something and doesn't sit on the sidelines. And we're doing that in two primary geographies. One is our North Federal Invest Health Corridor. Unfortunately, we've been an Invest Health community also. Thank you, Robert Wood Johnson. And what this will allow us to do in this corridor is to actually take what we've been working on and take it to the next step. And we're really excited about that opportunity. This corridor is really interesting because it's the only place in the Metro Denver area where two of our rail lines have stations within a mile of each other. So it's a corridor kind of bookended by transit, but with lost opportunity in the middle. And a lot of work going on in this area. The other area is what we call the West Denver Renaissance Collaborative, which is actually a group of 9 communities in West Denver. And we're partnering with a whole host of organizations to revitalize this area. It's an area rich in culture, Hispanic culture, Asian culture. You know, it's just I almost hate to use the word melting pot, but it's a potpourri, bringing together people from different cultures to really enjoy those cultures and enjoy the presence. And so there's a lot of economic opportunity that we're hoping to achieve, the flow of capital into this area. And again, this is an area in which there's a lot of learning that can then be taken to new places within Denver. And so finally, there's this, who must be involved? And you know, the answer is everybody. We have to have the city and county staff people from throughout the Metro Denver area. We have to have the developers at the table. We have to stop this idea that development is the enemy. Development is happening anyway, so we have to have them at the table. Elected officials, funders, advocacy and community groups, the regulatory agencies who've never been involved in this kind of thing before and who will be key, the regional transit district staff and directors, our utilities, but most important of all, the members of our communities, the people who are often left out or underrepresented at the table. That means young people, old people, people of differing abilities, people from all races, ethnic groups, and income. They have to be our partners, and that's really the ground floor of all the work that we're doing. So, well, there's no end slide. Again, I want to thank you from our hearts for having this opportunity, and we look forward to working with every one of you over the next 3 years.
Good morning. I am going to ask the next panelists to come up and join me for our discussion on locally driven, community powered. And can we give both Denver and Chicago a little bit of love again? Right? So our panel, I have to say I am excited about this entire day, but I'm especially excited about our panel. Our panel, we're going to be discussing locally driven, community powered, really building on what folks were sharing in Chicago and Denver. With the central question of why racial equity needs to be at the center of building thriving communities. We have an incredible panel to help us with that discussion. We have Darren Walker, President Ford Foundation, Terry Ludwig, President at Enterprise Community Partners, and two SPARCC collaborative members, Juan Carlos Linares at Lucha in Chicago, and Deborah Scott, Georgia Stand-Up from Atlanta. My name's Glenn Harris. I am the president at the Center for Social Inclusion. I'll be moderating today. We're a national, the Center for Social Inclusion is a national policy strategy organization based here in New York with a simple mission. We work with community, government, and other institutions to dismantle structural racial inequity. Really, this session is really to focus on the opportunity to change how America builds where we work, live, and play, right? At its heart, we're going to be having a discussion that's fundamentally about how people of color and low-income communities can plan, own the places that they live in, right? And how in accomplishing that, all communities can participate in building and ownership of their own neighborhoods. At CSI, we often say that the disparity gap we see is not just a values gap, but more fundamentally, a practice gap. How do we actually put into operation equity? How do we actually put into practice the outcomes we want to see in our communities? And so to that end, today we're going to discuss why racial equity is key to building prosperous communities. We want to name some of the history of racial inequity in our communities. We want to name some promising strategies. We want to talk about practice. And finally, we want to talk about why an integrated vision and approach like SPARCC of investing in multi-sector, locally driven collaboratives is actually essential for communities of color and low-income communities. So I'm going to jump into our panel because I know you all want to hear from them. But before I do, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. And you all, I think, have cards, or you will be getting cards. And if you would jot down your questions, when we get close to the end of our panelist discussion, we'll have folks come and collect them, and we'll get some of our panelists to respond. And I'm going to transition. Thank you. Hi. That felt like an Oprah moment for a second. So I'm actually going to start with Darren. We're just going to jump in. Darren, the considerable resources and influence of Ford, you have placed it squarely on equity. So I want to start by just asking you, what do you see as emerging opportunities around addressing inequality? And in that vision, how does SPARCC fit into that? How does equity and the built environment fit into that?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm so honored to be included today. And first, I must congratulate my sister, Dr. Lavizzo-Mourey, because she has been an inspiration to me and a mentor as I have come into my role as president of Ford. And equity is something she and I talk about a lot in philanthropy, because it may come as a surprise to you, but within our sector of philanthropy, diversity is a challenge. And having a black woman with an MD and an MBA as head of the most important philanthropy in America working on health is a message about equity in America. And so it has been with great pride that I have watched her excel in this role, and it is an understatement to say that she will be missed. Let me just say that the issue of equity is important because we can't be America without equity at the center of the American narrative. And that is very hard to achieve in a society where the narrative is that we are a meritocracy. And so we have to get uncomfortable to realize our own aspirations. And so as a philanthropy, our job, achieving our mission as the Ford Foundation, which is really about building a more just and fair world, requires us to look at equity. So let me move from the abstract to the real. And so to me, to return to 135th Street, because I worked just 3 blocks away in the basement of a church at Abyssinian. And so many of you in this audience who I know and have admired for so long are some of those long-standing relationships from my Abyssinian days. But when I lived and worked in Harlem in the early 90s, it was a very different community. And I remember what it was like to walk from 120th Street to Abyssinian on a daily basis in 1993, and it looks very different today. And there's much that I am proud that Abyssinian contributed, and there were many, many, many actors, some in this room, who made the development possible. But equity was just beginning in a real way to even be discussed. And there were little things that were done. So, for example, a policy change to ensure that any new development that the city put any money in, had to set aside 30% of the units for people from these zip codes, incumbent residents. So there were little things like that, but they were insufficient in my view. They were insufficient, and so I'm very proud of what's happened in Harlem and the remarkable transformation of this community. I mean, I could just tell you that, in 1992, when I would go to the bodega on 120th and Lenox, and there would be brown lettuce, expired cereal, milk that did not look like it had more than a day left of freshness in it, to walk past a new Whole Foods is remarkable. Yep. But for black folks in this community, it is a threat. And so the idea that progress is seen as a threat is a problem of equity. And so last week I was speaking in Brooklyn, and of course for you non-New Yorkers, Brooklyn is the hotbed right now when I moved to New York in the 80s, like nobody wanted to live in Brooklyn. I mean, and now like everybody at the Ford Foundation except for me wants to live in Brooklyn. I mean, but what's happened is, we were having a conversation like this, and an African-American woman in the room stood up and she said, basically, please do not build this new supermarket in my community. Please do not bring these new amenities, because that will be the end of us. And so how can we have a circumstance that produces that kind of distorted response, which is a genuine, authentic response of a black woman living on a fixed wage in a community that she has lived in good times and bad, and who now has a beautiful rendering of a new supermarket and all of these new amenities that are coming, which she actually sees as a threat. So we have to get at equity if we're to actually change mindsets. But to change mindsets, we have to make concrete changes of policy, of resource allocation, of prioritizing the needs of incumbent residents in development, and giving real voice and empowerment to their priorities.
Thank you. I appreciate you, yes. No, really, bringing the complexity in, right? We got to be real about the complexity of this conversation. And I'm going to actually jump to Terry to help us go a little bit deeper into that conversation. So Enterprise has a long history of investing in low-income communities, especially, of course, around affordable housing. And we are not getting the outcomes we want to see unless we have affordable housing. It's central to equity. How are sort of integrated strategies like SPARCC, how is that influencing the housing, especially the low-income housing sector? How is this conversation around equity, around bringing in health, around bringing in environment, how is that bringing some of that complexity in the conversation with low-income housing?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thanks. It's such a privilege to be here with you all today, with the panelists as well. So, this effort of SPARCC goes right to the heart of the mission of Enterprise. We were founded 30 years ago with the mission to say, how can we connect people to opportunity, starting with a healthy and affordable home in a diverse and thriving community? So this is at the heart of what we have been up to. And I would say that we believe that that home that Darren was just talking about, being able to afford that, being able to have that in a community as an essential platform for well-being and for growth is absolutely essential. And we know it is insufficient. We know that it must be connected to jobs, to transit, to education, to health. And we know the issues that we're facing that we've just heard about just prior to this session, seeing pictures of. These are integrated challenges. So we also need integrated solutions. That's just fundamental. So, and equity is just an enormous part of that. And I think, all of us, not that we needed this data to really validate, but I remember reading the Raj Chetty studies that came out that said, not only is this critical for a children's future to be, when you have a child that is in a high poverty neighborhood, that each year they spend in that high poverty neighborhood, it lessens their chance of going to college. It lessens their life expectancy. It lessens their income potential. So not only is this work known, but the urgency for our children's future could not be more real. And when I think about the housing policy that's attached to those questions, that's when we get to fundamental equity questions. That's when, at Enterprise, we sponsored something called Undesign the Red Line in our office. We had thousands of people come through to see that. And that was a long look at the history of what does it mean to redline a community? What does it mean to have covenants that were based explicitly on race, and to have isolated communities years later as a result of that? So, those were intentional policies to isolate people in place. That is at the heart of much of the work that we're doing. And with that intentionality, we have to have just as strong of intentionality to reverse that. So when we're thinking about our lens of equity and health and climate, those are all landing squarely on low-income communities that it is our opportunity, it's our responsibility to work together to really address. So for Enterprise, we are thrilled to be at the table with partners, with new partners, but most importantly, as we've worked across the country in these last 30 years, we've had very holistic solutions. We've driven these integrated kind of connections, but I think what we've learned more than anything is what we have just heard, which is that if you don't have resident voices at the table, you are not getting to the heart of the matter. So again, affirmatively, to get to the heart of the matter, we must have resident voices and partners that really allow these voices to have the voice, the power to help set that agenda. So I think that's more than anything what we're learning, and I think one of the most distinguishing characteristics about the SPARCC Challenge that I'm really, really excited about. Yeah.
Thank you. I love that you named, really people, place, and power, getting real about naming power. And Darren, you named it as well. And I was going to turn to Deborah and Juan Carlos to talk a little bit about what that has looked like in a historical context, right? How has that played out in community? How have we seen racial inequity play out in community? We started to name some, big picture redlining. But also, sort of following up on Terry's point, so given that, what does it mean to really center community? What does it really mean to bring community into envisioning where our communities are going? And maybe starting with Deborah.
Well, first of all, thank you, and thank you, Darren. And I think I see Jerry up there. Thank you so much, Jerry Maldonado. The fact that Ford and a number of funders have seen the value in investing in communities for such a long time, and investing in the South in particular. We know as the South goes, so goes the rest of the country. And we know that race has an important place in the way in which we talk about our work. It's about the mothers, it's about the daughters, it's about Tyrone and Rochelle. It's about people who need to go to work, that can't afford to go to work. It's about housing that is inadequate. It's about health care that is insufficient. It's about not being able to afford your medicine or choosing between medicine and fresh food. It's about food deserts. It's about the children that are coming behind us. So this opportunity is really a blessing for us, because a lot of us have been working in this sector for a long time in different ways, and sometimes we have to segregate our work depending on what funders may want us to do or may support. But we have been always intentional. You hate to hear that, but it's true, right? But the thing about it is, this SPARCC initiative is so comprehensive because we're dealing with race and putting race first. So it's okay to be Black, right? It's okay. We're in style now, right? So it's
Black is the new Black.
Black is beautiful, right? So it's okay to say that we're going to help Black children, we're going to help brown children. We don't have to skirt around the issue anymore. It's okay to look at the numbers and say that if you help this Black child, you will be helping 7 generations. It's okay. It's okay to say the legacy of slavery has affected all of us negatively, but we rise. So we thank you for this opportunity, really, to just bring us in the room. So if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. So we think about, our culture, we think about food, we think about music, and we celebrate the gloriousness of Black and brown people. But in this initiative, we'll be able to say, with a Black child in the room, we're going to make your life better. We're going to make sure that even though this train comes through your neighborhood, and even though we're building houses in this neighborhood, that you're going to be able to stay here if you want to. That you're going to be able to shop at that Whole Foods, so you won't have to feel like if the Whole Food comes, that means we have to go. That's right. So as we celebrate the newness of this moment, we recognize that for all of you that are out there, I stand and sit for you on your shoulders, because you're not here, but we're here. Thank you.
Hello.
And thank you for those comments. And thank you for the invitation to participate too. Glenn, forgive me, I'm going to go way back to last Friday in terms of history. Because to paint a picture of urgency as it relates to Chicago and the opportunities presented to us from the SPARCC Challenge and from Enterprise as well. So I was driving through the west side of Chicago, and by the way, Joanna and Rosa did a great job of showing the macro view of Chicago and our challenges. I was driving through the west side of Chicago near my office just last Friday, and I witnessed a drive-by shooting. And it was scary. It was scary. When those gunshots fired, I froze, right? And there were kids walking home from school, just down the block. There was a taco cart, and there was people all around it. And it was brazen, right? These young guys just shooting at each other out of their cars. And the cars just went flying and kept shooting at each other. And I was, I had anxiety for like 2 days, right? My wife kept asking me, like, you gonna be okay? And I said, well, I got to go to New York City, so I got to shape up here, right? So, but imagine that now and multiply that by the tens of thousands of people that live in Chicago and have to experience this on a daily basis, right? So now we're talking about effects on mental health and emotional health, right? And so Lucha, our organization, our mission is to advance housing as a human right, and we do so through several services related to housing, but also through affordable housing development. And how does that relate to health now? How does that relate to health equity, right? Well, Enterprise stepped in and partnered with us on several occasions. I'll just go through three briefly. The first of which I'll talk about was the most recent, our health impact assessment that we did, relating health outcomes to affordable housing. And it was very SPARCC-like. You know, we worked with 5 different agencies around the country. We learned from each other. And what we knew we would find when we partnered with the Illinois Institute of Public Health was high prevalences of asthma and diabetes in our communities. We knew we would find that. We see that it's observable in our communities. What we were surprised to find out were these issues of isolation and anxiety and depression. People don't want to leave their homes, right? But is it just that, right? So the second area where we're partnering with enterprises, they're supporting us with a health and wellness fellow now that's going to actually go out and see why these outcomes are there and create new evaluation instruments, ask new questions. You know, what should we be measuring? Is it programming? Is it the built environment? How are we working with our tenants and our neighbors, right? And then the last one I'll mention was actually the first time we partnered with Enterprise. So we're building an affordable housing development called Tierra Linda, or the Beautiful Earth. This is in the Humboldt Park Logan Square neighborhood. So we straddle between the very disinvested neighborhoods of the west side to the north side, which you saw through Joanna Rosa's presentation. And just along the 606 trail, as Rosa mentioned, there's 19,000 Latino families have been displaced since 2000 because of the rapid gentrification. So Enterprise helped us with a series of eco-charrettes, bringing the community out and them telling us how to design these buildings. What do they want to see? The first thing they said was really affordability, right? We want to stay here. Please, can you help us? And these are largely single mothers from Mexico and Puerto Rico and so on and so forth. The second thing they wanted to see was outdoor activity. They want to go outside, right? So we activated some of the empty lots we had to do gardening programming and biking programming, and we still continue that with now our health and wellness fellow. The third thing, interestingly, and I was happy to hear this because this is my passion, they said we want to be worthy of a sustainable development in our own neighborhood, right? Do something beautiful, do something sustainable. We want this. So we're proud to say and this just went through City Council for approval yesterday, we'll be building the first multifamily passive building in the Midwest. A passive building, for those that don't know, is a certification where the building, in short, the building is so well sealed, you don't really need the heat or air mechanicals. So you're saving energy up to 95% of your energy costs, and it's the carbon footprint is just lowered to by several degrees there. So we're proud to put that forward and to model that for others. So we're having systemic behavioral change now because we're learning with our tenants once that's up how to live in a building like this and how to maintain that ultra energy efficient building. But we're also showing systemic policy change because we're teaching the City of Chicago Department of Buildings how to change the code to be able to construct a building to this energy efficiency, because currently you can't do it, right? So, a small but mighty nonprofit like Lucha, when we partner with Enterprise, when we partner with the SPARCC Challenge here, we can have a regional impact on these things.
Can have that impact. I want to make sure, being conscious of time, I want to make sure that we start to collect any questions that you all have so that we can get the wisdom from this collective group. And I want to sort of build off what Juan Carlos was ending with, which is the opportunity, but also to keep it real and to talk about the challenges. And so we're just getting SPARCC off the ground and open this to all of you to respond. What are some of the opportunities in thinking about getting this work to scale? And what are some of the challenges as we sort of embark in the work?
Well, certainly it's an opportunity to really bring together people that, have not been at the decision-making table and ask them front and center, what do you want, what do you need to survive first, and then what do you need to thrive? When you look at a place like Atlanta, it looks wonderful, right? And I'm sure you'll see in the presentation from the Transformation Alliance that it's a beautiful place. But then if you look beyond the trees, if you look and you see the faces of people that are born poor in the city of Atlanta that don't get a chance to rise above that, you realize that there's something wrong here. When you have 30 to 40 years of Black elected officials in place. But yet the poverty rate continues to go down for some. However, there's Black millionaires everywhere, right? So it's a dichotomy, right? So I guess this opportunity allows us to bring policy makers, decision makers, elected officials, and the community front and center to ask the question, what do we do in these communities? How can we help? How can we fix it? It's our problem now. It's our job to fix it. So whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's just understanding the culture of communities, this is an opportunity for us to, one, work together, two, build upon the data that says there's a problem. Because sometimes we're too polite in the South at times. You know, we don't want to say that the problem is race, right? The problem is, segregation. The problem was slavery, and we continue to perpetuate this. So we get to say it, and we get to say it out loud, and with the support of the funders, we can say that, Ford said it's a problem. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Oh, Ford said it's a problem, it's a problem. So Darren, I need you to say it's a problem, right?
They know that I think it's a problem.
Yes. So we have an opportunity because we have a city elections coming up, and we are asking our elected officials to look at our platforms, look at what we're trying to do, and support this before you get elected, and tell us that you're with us, and show us by your votes. And so it's an opportunity to hold them accountable. It's an opportunity to bring the community into the space in an authentic way, not just, look at that picture and don't you like that, and not realizing that's Miss Johnson's house. And she doesn't realize that if she didn't go to that meeting, that the building sits on her house. So we get to build in a responsible way with partners like Enterprise. And Megan is wonderful, thank you, and Odetta. But it's great that we're able to be responsible and think forward and think responsibly. Thank you.
I think that what is the opportunity here is for SPARCC to be a platform to challenge privilege and hierarchy. Because what Deborah is talking about is not unique, and it is important to not forget about privilege, because if we believe that addressing this as simply a racial issue will solve the problem, it won't, because what you just said, there are Black millionaires all over Atlanta. There are Black millionaires all over Johannesburg and Cape Town now. And you go to South Africa, and the poverty rate is appalling. And so we have to talk about privilege. And so, yes, you Black millionaires, you are now privileged. What are you doing with that privilege? And talk about hierarchy and how these historical, hierarchical, cultural norms and standards and practices are now systemically a part of our society. So how do we deconstruct those hierarchies that reproduce and perpetuate the intergenerational systemic bad outcomes for some people who always seem to have bad outcomes in our society? And so I think SPARCC can be one such platform to do that in a very rigorous way, and in a way in which all of the players who need to be at the table are at the table and talking about things in a very unusual way. The environment, health, housing, climate, transportation. And this is what's really innovative about this initiative. I was a part of the sort of second generation of community change initiatives in the 80s and 90s. And what was missing from those, and part of why I think they, for the most part, and I'm generalizing, were not successful, is because they were siloed by discipline. And so they had a housing theory of change, or they had a health theory of change, but they didn't really have a comprehensive theoretical underpinning of what the problem diagnosis is. And the problem diagnosis is that it's not just one thing, it's a number of these things that produce the outcomes that we get. So another reason I'm just really excited about this initiative.
I'm gonna ask you to hold, because I want to make sure with the time we have that we get a couple of these questions in, and I'm gonna read off a couple of them so you all can respond. And I don't think you'll be surprised. It kind of builds on this theme. So the first one is, so how to get beyond the dedicated, highly engaged professional citizen, right? Lots of nodding heads on the stage. To engage a wider cross-section of community, right? This one is, again, sort of building off, I think, just these ideas of power, privilege. In cities with strong mayoral leadership, how are you building transformative change? And I'll read one more. Let me just, again, just building on the theme. How do we go beyond the call for community voice towards a centering of community power?
So I'll start with the first two, actually, which I see a theme there of going beyond the power structures, right?
Yes.
Or at least the conventional thinking and the conventional way of doing things. And I'll answer your previous question, too. One of the things that excites me about the SPARCC Challenge is, Deborah, you said it, a friend from Denver said it as well, is really genuinely activating community voices, right? So we all know what's going on in the federal government, right? So, but we shouldn't let them off the hook either, right? Because we have to partner with government in everything we do, right? But this allows us to come back to the local solutions. In fact, the micro local solutions, right? And people's ideas and energy and activating them at the central table. One thing I want to mention with Chicago in particular is, so we know the federal government circumstances we all share, but particularly in Chicago, local government has not necessarily been obstructionist, but not helpful in every way, either historically. This goes back to your history question. 31% of all of our aldermen, which are our local city councilmen, since 1971, 31% have gone to jail for corruption, right? As of this morning, it might be 32% actually. So I kid you not, I kid you not. 4 of our last 7 governors have gone to jail for corruption. And we've had a mayoral policy of, I mean, we are in a sense complicit as a city by voting our mayors in the last several mayors we've had in putting up the housing projects and separating African Americans from white enclaves, right? And putting up highways right in between communities. So we in a sense have been complicit. I have a good friend who is a poet. Our kids go to the same school, Leslie Honoré. She puts it in kind of a play on words because our last couple of mayors were named Daley. She says, you know, that boot on your neck is called Rom, but our fathers called it daily. Your grandfather called it daily, and we still try to survive daily, right? So, and that's the spirit, that last phrase, right, is to get to the question, I think activating these community voices with confidence and bringing these ideas to the central table is what excites us about this.
Love. Yes?
Okay. So, I mean, really, it's about going where the people are. When you talk about community organizing, and it's a difference between engagement and organizing, it's really going to the root and where people are, where they live, where they work, where they play, where their challenges are, and asking them what the problem is and how we can be a part of that solution. So, and when you look at elected officials, and you know, I can be critical, I've worked with a number of them over the last 30-something years, they all start out really well. You know, you kind of halfway believe in them. I miss Maynard Jackson very well, though, very much. But I would say that it's about holding them accountable for what they're going to do. And so it starts with understanding that we have a platform, we have a responsibility, and they do too, and we're electing them to serve us as the community. So it's teaching the community that you're in a hiring process during that election cycle, and that you get to hire those that represent you. And so that goes back to basic civic education, basic voter registration and voter education, and getting them involved with the civic platform on the local level. We have to start on the neighborhood and the street by street level. We have to go back to the door knocking and the ballot walking, and really talking about those issues and as bread and butter issues and how they affect our lives, and how the data says that if you don't invest in a people, that the people can turn on you. And so as we are termed out of our city election, our mayor election, and we're preparing for the next one, we're really looking critically at who's going to be representing us. And the city council, we're not going to take it for granted that they're going to be there, that we're actually seeking new applicants for those positions and asking them in a nonpartisan way, of course, asking them, what have you done for us lately? And what are you going to do in the future? And by the way, here's the agenda we'd like you to support. So, but I need Ms. Johnson to say that. So that's about knocking and sitting at Ms. Johnson's table and saying, you know, what do you think? And having her put it in her own words, and then her coming to the forum and saying that directly in her own words.
Absolutely. Terry, did you want to?
Yeah, and I'll just add briefly, I think that's fantastic. And I'm sitting here thinking about the political context that we're in, and just thinking about, you know, what does that mean to the SPARCC initiative? And I was out last night talking with the Global Impact Investing Network and talking about what does it mean to invest in your neighborhood, because a lot of this change is going to mean not only that we change and inform policy, but how do you drive investment? And thinking about what is this paradigm shift? Is this a paradigm shift? What are we in that? And if we're in a process, a period where things are being deconstructed, whether it's an agency like EPA, or whether it's a turnback of the Affordable Care Act, or housing policy may move in different directions, and certainly we've seen, you know, the social safety net issues all come under threat. How do we respond? And I believe the voice of residents of these communities and finding that power, finding that narrative and real solutions, this is the time. So maybe if I was going to build off the Hamilton example, I would say, not going to miss our shot, right? Like, let's don't miss that. Maybe this is that time.
Carrie, I love that. And we are wrapping up on time. And so I'm going to ask you the impossible question. We're talking 6 cities who are doing amazing work, leading in this discussion in many ways. But I know just at the Center for Social Inclusion, I know for Ford, there's hundreds of cities who are engaged in this process, who are doing good work. And so maybe just in closing, in a sentence, what would you actually offer folks to hold in thinking about taking on the challenges that we named of people, place, and power? And okay, maybe I'll give you 2 sentences. But in naming those pieces, what is it that folks could, in other cities, not just in these projects, where do folks start? Where do folks lean in? What do you think folks right now in this political moment need to hold?
Maybe I'll start backwards here. I'll say, Darren, I'm going to steal it right now, which is to say, let's get uncomfortable. And let's make sure that we are okay living with that, and let's be really, really open and listen. And I'm confident that we're going to have some amazing discoveries as we go along that we can build upon.
Love.
And I would say that that we can learn from each other, that, you know, the cities are interconnected, the problems are the same, but just different nuances that we can learn together. The Partnership for Working Families is a network that I'm a part of. There are resources that are out there that as we even grow this SPARCC network, that we're able to share with Memphis what not to do, right? So sometimes it's what to do and what not to do. And we can learn from LA, and we can learn from the Bay Area, and we can learn from Chicago. So it's creating a learning culture so that we know that we have each other's back, and that we're actually weaving a fabric together, that it's a quilt, and that if we work together, we can actually win.
I would agree with that, and I would add, let's be persistent about that. Right. Glenn, your activity in the last convening was fantastic. We leaned into our unbiased or unconscious or conscious racism and, all these issues that we internalize, getting to know Deborah as well. I mean, we should embrace each other and continue to learn from our victories and from our mistakes and just embrace each other persistently. Love.
Well, I think that we are in a moment in this country where we realize what is at stake, and that decisions being made by our policymakers can have an effect on the lives of people many generations to succeed us. And therefore, being educated about what this reform will mean and being engaged is something that in not just the SPARCC communities, but in every community in America, we desperately need. And it is difficult because the level of hopelessness in our society is alarming. And that hopelessness drives people to not participate, or some people who out of hopelessness participate and make desperate decisions. And so we have to understand the implications for reform. And so absolutely, let's reform our tax system. Let's reform it with a lens towards equity. And if we do that, we will see that we can have lower tax rates, which generate worthless tax credits, and then a reduction of subsidy for affordable housing. That together doesn't add up for a prosperous society that has equity as a part of its ethos. So I just think that we should feel emboldened in this moment and not dispirited, and certainly not dejected or depressed, because this is the time for America to be America. And so I'm quite optimistic. And when I come to programs like this and get to see long-standing friends I've admired for a long time and meet new friends and see so many people who I've admired over the years in the room, it's just really, really gratifying. So thank you very much, Glenn, for having us.
Thank you, Darren. I just want to say, I just have to say, because Darren triggered for me, and then you're going to give them endless love. I had the privilege of being on stage a week and a half ago with a Republican mayor, who's Mayor Berry from Albuquerque, who's committed to racial equity and working on it. And he said this thing that you all just named for me, that it really resonated, which was that between the space of rhetoric and apathy, there's a path that leads us to change. And I just wanted to share that. I feel like you all named that in so many powerful ways in our conversation. And I just want to thank you. And would you please give our panel a little bit of love?
What a great panel. That was terrific. And now what we're going to do is we have a couple more site spotlights to share. So I would like to ask the Bay Area and to come to the stage, and then we're going to be doing Atlanta thereafter.
Okay. Good morning. from the region that needs no introduction, I'm sure. I'm Melissa Jones from BARHI. We're the coalition of the public health departments in the Bay Area.
Hello, I'm Kate O'Hara. I'm with East Bay Alliance for Sustainable Economy. We're a community organization that's part of the Bay Area for All collaborative here.
And I'd like to introduce you to Bay Area for All. We are a fairly unique collaboration in the Bay Area. We are the Six Winds Coalition for social equity, which includes a number of base building organizations across the region, as well as advocacy groups and partners. The Great Communities Collaborative, which is a collaborative of funders focused on equitable development, and BARHI, which, as I mentioned, is the coalition of the public health departments. It was formed by 3 public health directors feeling very impatient at the pace of change and getting really focused on changing the living conditions that could impact health. We are in an incredible catalytic moment in the Bay Area. We have now a housing crisis that has reached such proportions in terms of affordability that there is no question in the general public that we have a problem. And our catalytic moment is that consciousness has actually led to political will, and we know that's not always the case. That consciousness led voters to pass $12 billion in funding in the November election for housing, transit, and infrastructure. And there's an incredible opportunity with that kind of influx. And it's an opportunity we know doesn't need to lead to equity. And so we think our catalytic moment is this opportunity to make sure that it does.
What we know to be true happening in the Bay Area right now is that the way that investment has been happening has been actually exacerbating racial and economic inequities and causing severe displacement. What we see here is a map that shows where are the places where displacement is ongoing and advanced in the dark purple and at risk in the light purple. And as you can see, it's not just an inner Bay Area problem. It's not just in San Francisco and Oakland. It's actually in the whole region and in the suburbs as well. So both low-income communities, communities of color are getting displaced out of our urban areas, but also they're getting displaced out of the suburbs. We're finding in the suburbs that already housing prices there are becoming unattainable for many families. And this all has a racialized aspect. So this shows, in particular, the changes in Black population. So San Francisco and Oakland have lost Black communities, have lost those families to displacement. In San Francisco, it's said that it's only 3% of people in San Francisco are Black today, and Oakland is going in the same direction. So the dark maroon is showing where it's going down, and then the green is showing where Black communities are relocating to, and increasingly it's into suburban communities. So Contra Costa County, which is in the top right, was the only county in the Bay Area over a 15-year period to see an increase in Black communities. And the reality is also for a lot of these people, they're displaced off this map. So this is the 9-county Bay Area, but as you continue go east, you go into the Central Valley, and many families are moving all the way there and driving back in 2-3 hours into the Bay Area to work.
And the health impacts on that are huge. So there's the health impacts that I think a lot of people think about when they think of affordability. So these are the health impacts that are about the forced choices between medicine and utilities for heating and cooling, the choices between food and really shrinking your food budget to make your housing work. But there's a whole lot of other things that happen. And one of the big ones that we see is around children and children who move frequently. And what we start to see when we get to really frequent moves is a year difference, a year gap in their academic performance, right, with those changes. We also see incredibly long commutes that don't make up the cost that people had hoped they'd make up as they got pushed further and further out. And so in the Bay Area, for every dollar that you're saving moving out of the central cities in housing, you're picking up 77 cents in transportation costs. And so it means those forced choices around health stay very strong as you continue to get further and further from the job centers. And it's very difficult for health and for family stability, mental health, and stress. And so we have some values about what that means and what we could do to work differently. And so the public health departments across the Bay Area have adopted this framework. So it's the California Department of Public Health. And in that framework, we've really moved from a focus on differences in life expectancy, differences in infant mortality, differences in disease rates, to looking at what can really scale changes, right? What can scale changes in those inequities? And that's really about the living conditions and the power we have. So you'll see in the circle the living conditions that make that difference, right? The physical environment, the economic environment that we live in and the access that we have to opportunities, the social environment, and then the institutions that impact all of those environments. This is a room that knows that institutions, that these are not all hidden hands of the market, that institutions make choices all day, every day that create these conditions. There are a lot of rooms we speak to that don't know that, and we spend a lot of time educating that as a priority. And then saying from that education comes power, right? That there are ways that we organize, there are ways that we move and make change, and that's really what Six Winds has done across the region in order to pass that incredible amount of that $16 billion that we're seeing now for housing and infrastructure.
And so in terms of how we're going to advance our vision, we're so excited to be a part of the SPARCC Collaborative. And I have to say, to be in a conversation where we can be talking about equitable development and really putting race and racial equity in our communities at the center is so refreshing. It is so exciting. And for us, it really builds on these networks and partnerships that have been in place in the Bay Area and enables us to build at a broader scale, but to stay rooted in our communities. And I think at this moment, you know, as was being said in the panel before, with what's happening on the national landscape, the innovation and the ability to be resilient is going to come in our cities and our regions. And so we're so excited to be a part of this with all of you and really appreciate the investment of the national team and the funders that have made this possible. And this shows a little bit of kind of our theory of change around this, that we need all of these pieces in place, from community stabilization to community-led development and community control and ownership, and that this, you know, runs the gamut in strategies from community engagement and organizing to policy and to actually putting development in the hands of the community. So the two particular strategies that we'll pursue as a part of SPARCC, one is community-led housing preservation. So as a part of the displacement and increased housing costs, we are losing at a rapid rate the naturally occurring affordable housing. So of course we want to build as much new affordable housing as possible, but we also want to preserve what is there through land trusts or land banking models that really build on the leadership of tenants who have long-term living in the community. So we're looking at models for small site acquisition that can really help communities to stay and thrive in place. And that will leverage the $12 billion in public resources that we've just approved around the region. The other major resource we have at our fingertips is a number of large-scale public land sites around the region that are ripe for development and create generational opportunities for transformative development. This is one example, which is in the city of Concord, which is in Contra Costa, the county I mentioned earlier. This site is the size of half of San Francisco. So it is an enormous site, has the potential for 12,000 housing units, 29,000 jobs. It's largely vacant. It's a former naval base. And so it's an opportunity to do development in a way that's connected to the BART station and that really brings the community into the process. And while so far there's been the kind of typical community engagement happening, it hasn't really brought in the long-term immigrant community, the low-income communities of color that exist in this city that are not represented, reflected, or listened to in this city structure. And so we're hoping this can be a model of how do we do development in a suburban community in a different political context that brings all of these values of climate resiliency and health and racial equity to the forefront. So just in closing, that's Atlanta. We are really so excited to be a part of this, and I think, for all of us, we can think about times when we are in places where we feel really valued, where we feel really safe and included, and to me, that's really at the heart of what we're trying to build and create here, that we want communities that are a foundation for everybody to thrive, for everybody to have a sense of community and belonging. So thank you.
Good morning from Atlanta. Thank you. In the South, you are expected to say, the audience is expected to say good morning back, so thank you for that. We are excited to be here. I am Marissa Ghani with the Atlanta Regional Commission, the MPO for the region, and I have the honor of being the program manager for the Transformation Alliance.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Megan Vlkovic with Enterprise Community Partners, co-lead for the Transformation Alliance and SPARCC Initiative.
This is a picture of our Oakland City MARTA station. It sits within the southwest quadrant of Atlanta. And really, I just wanted to show this picture to set a context. This is what many of our MARTA stations look like. They have empty parking lots, crumbled infrastructure. They are surrounded by single-family neighborhoods that were greatly affected by the foreclosure crisis. Historically Black low-income neighborhoods. And really, it provides challenges and it provides opportunities. And we hope that through our work, we can really change these neighborhoods and change the opportunities that these stations offer. So as many of our colleagues have said today and know, place matters. Place matters in our country, and it matters especially within the Atlanta region. Only 3.4% of our jobs are accessible by 45 minutes of transit. That is not even accounting for skill level and how that decreases those opportunities. So if you don't have a car in Atlanta, you don't have access to jobs. You don't have access to those opportunities. Income mobility. 4% of our children who are born poor have an opportunity to be in that top wealth gap. That is a sad number. And so this is just the context of the issues that we're dealing with, that many of you know, but we want to help change. The Transformation Alliance came together about 4 years ago. 5 to 6 years ago, the MARTA was talking about transit-oriented development and how they wanted to raise their ridership through it. The Beltline was about to come online. People were excited. And a group of nonprofits, government agencies, those working on TOD with the support of Forward Foundation came together and said, how do we support TOD? The goal that came out was a TOD hub, but what we came together as a TOD hub, we said it's more than bricks and mortar. It's about the opportunities that these stations can offer and ensuring that the investments made in these communities are offered to the vulnerable people within them. So we have been at the Transformation Alliance for 4 years now, and we continue to grow as a collaborative. We have 17 core members, but we also have a number of other partners that we engage with throughout the region to work on these issues. And we continue to grow with our SPARCC initiative and SPARCC support that we greatly appreciate to cover the lenses of climate and health. And we're excited to see how those are intertwined into the conversation.
Great. I wanted to review with you some of the structure that we've been working around under the Transformation Alliance and now pulling into our SPARCC work. So the Transformation Alliance is focusing on a few key areas: housing, transit and job access, climate and health, and people, arts, and culture. And racial equity will be at the center of all of the work that we do in our SPARCC initiative. All of these efforts that we've listed here are designed to foster equitable transit-oriented development, and that's so critical now because MARTA, which is our transit authority, and this is how it initially started, was about to put out RFPs for all of its underutilized parking lots. So we needed to organize around this to make sure that equitable principles and affordability was a part of those efforts. And you'll notice that MARTA is on our executive committee on the Transformation Alliance. And by equitable, what do we mean? We mean that the benefits and the resources that are coming in through these investments are available to our vulnerable communities and our communities of color. One of the projects that we did as the Transformation Alliance is we worked with an organization, Reconnecting America at the time, to help us put data together to help do a topology framework so that we could identify the strategies that were needed at each of the stations. Some of them needed affordable housing, some of them needed preservation, and then some of them had enough affordable housing, but they need access to jobs and access to good health care. So this is actually a rendering at the MLK station. It's one of the TOD sites that MARTA is putting out. And housing and innovative capital is critical to the work that we're going to do forward. Finding funds to develop new and preserve affordable housing. In the housing industry, we've heard about the tsunami of expiring properties that are about to occur. I think in the city of Atlanta, by 2022, more than 9,000 units of affordable housing will expire. So how do we get ahead of that and find proactive approaches, particularly in our communities that we know transit is going to occur and we might have the loss of affordability? Another example of how we're working with our state housing finance agency to start considering how they might use their funds a little more flexibly. For instance, the tax credit assistance program, how they might work and leverage with the capital through the CDFIs in the region so that they could double or triple their impact. Transit and job access. So the Transformation Alliance has been an advocate in the conversation regarding MARTA's transit investment and expansion that will occur because of a recent passage of a half-penny sales tax. We talk about this as a catalytic moment. However, and the Beltline was mentioned briefly, but the Beltline is a 22-mile loop of transit, trails, and parks connecting 45 communities in Atlanta, and that is also a part of this effort. Wherever the Beltline is starting to build trails and parks, we are starting to see gentrification. So part of our work and the area which we'll identify that we're focused on for SPARCC is trying to get ahead of that as well. I also, in addition to advocating for investment in infrastructure, the Transformation Alliance under the SPARCC initiative is committed to advocating and creating policy to ensure that good jobs are connected to the residents of the communities who are impacted by the expanded infrastructure. Health and climate. So health and climate is new for us. It is desperately needed. No doubt the data is telling us that. And some of the initiatives we're going to be looking at is rehabbing homes to make sure that they're healthy and energy efficient. We're engaging youth in healthy recreational opportunities through transit. Examples include soccer at transit stations, and this is called Soccer in the Streets. It is the first soccer field at a transit station in the country, and we're hoping to bring that to our transit corridor that we've identified under the SPARCC initiative. There's another program called Safe Routes to Schools. We're trying to use that program to create safer routes to schools and to community public parks. And this is not only about placemaking, but this is about connecting our city and our region through destination making. And in addition, something very critical, the area that we've chosen has, the data tells us that there are food deserts everywhere. So we need to be deliberate and intentional about creating access to healthy food. And then people, arts, and culture. So this is most importantly, perhaps, we are ensuring that people are empowered to be a part of the process, that they have a voice in the development that's happening in their community. Currently, we have a curriculum called the Transformation Academy. We're helping folks to identify how people can best engage in their community. An example is through their neighborhood planning unit. Here in New York, their community planning boards. I've used to do those quite a bit back in the day. And then we're using arts and culture as a platform to spark conversation and engage community in the process. And we're also building out and strengthening a community organizing platform under the SPARCC initiative. So here's an example. This is a mural at the MLK station. Again, this is also a site that MARTA has put out for transit-oriented development. And it's our En route program run by Wonder Route, one of our partners in the Transformation Alliance. The mural is a result of a 10-month community engagement process, including community stakeholder groups who envision the mural, and then community artists who are commissioned to actually do the work. And then lastly, I might just add, one of the things that we have done to assist in this process is create an equity evaluator tool. And it is a tool that helps to measure the impact and the benefits to the community that development is bringing in that neighborhood. And with SPARCC, we hope to actually bring that to the 2.0 and the 3.0 version. But what we are hoping to elevate is bring that tool to be a part of application processes with our public partners and our transit partners. And MARTA has actually tested this in one of their RFPs at the Oakland City train station, which is our area of focus.
I just want to go back to this mural because it's beautiful and an example of really wonderful community engagement and a product of ownership for that community. SPARCC comes to us at a point of urgency. We have been working 4 years to build this foundation, but now the Beltline continues to be developed. The examples of what the Beltline does are apparent to the community. MARTA continues to develop their transit stations. We recently just voted as the City of Atlanta to invest $30 billion in transit infrastructure. So how will these community investments benefit the vulnerable communities within these communities? So please roll the video. This is our eloquent partners speaking about our work that we'll do through SPARCC.
Atlanta has finished dead last in the United States in income inequality. It's unacceptable for the capital of the South.
We do know that we have two Atlantas right now. And it's not like it's been two Atlantas recently. It's been two Atlantas for quite a while.
But at the same time, we all suffer as a result of it because we all sit in traffic. We all have access to bad air and bad water.
This cannot continue. As the market continues to come back, as upper middle class people continue to move from the suburbs back into the city,
we need to make sure that boom has a balance to it, that it has equity.
You know, all things are not equal because people are not starting at the same place. When you talk about housing, we are disproportionately adversely affected.
Rental rates within the city of Atlanta are beyond the price of average citizens. The workforce here cannot afford to live in our city.
And if we don't do anything about it now, it's going to continue to fester.
Children and getting someplace in their life, being successful, it means my daughter has a chance out here. Equity means to my community development.
The way that business is done is people at the top coming together, making decisions, and not including the people whose lives are affected by the decisions that are made in the process of making those decisions.
We have to be intentional about setting the table so that those conversations about race, class, and politics really happen in an intentional way.
I listen to my son. He says, I'm frustrated, Dad.
And that we come up with solutions together.
Black Lives Movement, when you sing downtown, polluted with people and signs, that's how you need to go to the city council. Instead of stopping traffic, go flood City Hall.
There's no doubt that ETOD touches on climate, touches on health, touches on racial equity. And what we have to do as an alliance is make sure that MARTA has the resources, ability, infrastructure, relationships, political cover, and strategies to do that in the best possible way. The Transformation Alliance is the network through which that happens. MARTA is going to partner with developers to build around many, many transit stations. And so if the Transformation Alliance can increase its capacity to support MARTA in that work through creative placemaking strategies, through housing and finance policy strategies, through energy equity strategies, then we're increasing the opportunity for people in Atlanta for their health to be better, for there to be better air quality in Atlanta because more people are riding MARTA because they live closer to a MARTA station than getting in a car and polluting the environment. That's the kind of work that the Transformation Alliance is really trying to do.
I'm a single parent with 3 teenagers, but the house is perfect for me. I don't have to actually struggle or try to figure out how I'm gonna do this. It fits in with my lifestyle according to my finances and me and my kids. They walk everywhere because everything's so close. You don't have to strive to live above your means to have something that's for you and your family. You don't have to. I'm not living above my means, but I'm comfortable and this house is perfect. It's perfect for my family.
MARTA is forging ahead in this ETOD movement, and the Transformation Alliance was largely created to support MARTA in those efforts.
What does the future of Atlanta look like, and how do we make sure that everyone in the region prospers?
With thoughtful growth, we can improve the community while preserving the way of life for those residents who built that community.
Thank you, that was a great video. Just to end, this is the corridor / neighborhoods that we really hope to influence with our work. This is just the beginning of mapping some of the assets that belong within that community. Remarkably, this is a food desert, but it actually has the most urban gardens within a square footage, I think, within the country. So how do we make systems for these people to access that food? So thank you again, and thank you for having us as part of the team. Atlanta is excited to build on our foundation and use SPARCC to really bolster a lot of our work. So thank you.
Great. Well, what a great presentations by both regions, huh? Terrific. And we're a little bit behind in our schedule. We have another panel that's going to be coming up. We would like to take a 10-minute break. And if you can be back at about 11:50 or so, we will start our next panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back.
Don't hurt your back. You can stand straight up.
I can't. I'm so used to the
No, it's okay.
needing to adjust.
You're fine. It'll get you. So you don't have to hurt yourself and bend over like that, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Just speak up. It'll be fine.
Let's see. I was given. We are getting ready to start again. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. The microphones are all on. Looks like we have a lot of people in the hallway, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started in here. So I used to run an AmeriCorps program, and I learned an important lesson about time. What I learned is we were a regional program, and we had people coming from far away, and what I learned is when we gave the grace period, people came later and later and later. And then one day, you know, I had somebody come in and he was early, and I said, "Oh wow, you're really early coming from San Jose." And he said, "Well, I saw you were first on the agenda and I knew you wouldn't wait." And I wouldn't. So welcome everyone. I know there's a lot of good conversation happening in the hallways, but we did want to have a chance to really talk about the importance of health to SPARCC. I've introduced myself already, so I won't spend much time doing that. My name is Melissa Jones. I'm with the Bay Area Regional Health and Equities Initiative. That's our full name, but people only recognize it as BARHI. And we are the coalition of the public health departments. We care a lot about health equity, social determinants of health, and really seeing change for communities in health and wealth and all of the things that make our lives great and our regions great. And I'm joined today with a really powerful panel of people. Nancy Andrews from the Low Income Investment Fund, Don Swartz from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Marian Standish from the California Endowment, John Williams, the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. And they all have a vision and a frame about the importance of health and its connection to community development. And our goal is to talk about the cutting edge of that work today. We want to talk a bit about why health is so important to SPARCC and to each funder partner that's up here on the stage. about where we aspirationally want to be with health, because we've been talking about health and community development. What is the next phase and next stage of that work now? And what are the challenges we'll need to overcome to meet our collective vision? And so with that, I'm going to do the swap. Thank you. And John, I think we'll start with you. And I want to give you an opportunity to make some opening remarks about the connection between health and wealth and community development.
Great, and it's great to be here. It's great to see SPARCC taking off now after all the work that's been going on the last couple years around this. So it's a very exciting day for us at the San Francisco Fed. So you might ask yourself, well, why is the San Francisco Fed, Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, actually involved in SPARCC in the first place? So what is our role in this? And I would turn that question around a bit and kind of ask it this way: well, why is an organization like the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, which cares deeply, very involved in our economic future, how could we step aside on an initiative that's dealing with such important issues like SPARCC is? So that's why we're involved. I think I go back to a basic idea that prosperity is like a Jenga tower. You remember the toy with the blocks of the tower? So with a Jenga tower, each piece matters for the stability of the entire tower. And on the flip side, if you take out one piece, you put the tower's stability at risk, and of course, if you take too many pieces out, the tower can fall. I think the same applies for economic well-being. Economic well-being, as we've heard already this morning, it depends critically on a host of factors, not one or two, but many, that all together make for a healthy, strong, vibrant, resilient community. For us, for our economy to reach its economic potential, it means that we need to address all of these together, not piecemeal, but together in a whole. That means economic mobility, health, jobs, education, and many others. And that's what we see as a key factor in SPARCC, and also we already saw in some of the presentations today. It's also what we see in the work of all the panelists that are joining me in their work, bringing together all these different aspects in terms of thinking about healthy communities. And obviously, we all thank the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for their work in bringing people together and supporting this under their Culture of Health initiative. We all live in a world where our ability to reach our maximum economic potential really depends on our neighbors reaching theirs as well. We all do better when everyone thrives. And thinking about that, economists, I'm an economist, so I tend to think about things that we can measure, things I can put in our models and analyze. But, in preparing for today's event, I was reminded of something that Robert Kennedy said, and I'm going to read this because these are his words, and I don't want to mess these up. The gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the intelligence of our public debate. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And he concluded, and it can tell us everything about America except why we are proud that we are Americans. So I talked to a bunch of economists yesterday at an event in New York, economic forecasters, and the topic of the conversation was really about how do we get this economy growing faster, gaining greater prosperity in the context of what I often call a Goldilocks economy, and that's one that's not running too hot and not too cold, one that continues to provide jobs, but that doesn't risk another crisis or a recession. And one of the points I made to that group was that this will require significant investments in our communities. And although it's not purview of monetary policy, part of my job, that can solve that problem. Each of us can do things, take our own steps in our own ways. And in that context, I think of an ancient proverb that says, while none of us are obligated to complete the work of repairing the world, this does not give any of us license to step aside and cease from trying. And so at the San Francisco Fed, we take that advice proverb very seriously. It means, although that we are not allowed by law to make direct investments into these areas that we're talking about today, we do view our mission and our values absolutely obligate us to do our best to bring stakeholders together to achieve the future that we aspire to for our communities. Now, at the San Francisco Fed, we've set a very serious goal to create a more diverse and inclusive culture and workforce at the Fed. And that means we've done this for two reasons. One is it's the right thing to do from a moral standpoint. It's also the right thing to do from a business standpoint in order to make sure that we're attracting the widest net of talent, the best ideas, the best perspectives, the greatest experiences will help us do our jobs better. And I think that applies exactly equally to thinking about communities and how do we make stronger, healthier communities that enrich all of our lives. You know, when you think about the U.S. economy as a whole, anytime that if you hold any part of the economy back, you're actually holding all of us back. And there was reference already to the research on this, which is just overwhelming. We know that if you provide more income to families, their kids do better on math and reading tests, their scores go up. We know that if you can get people better housing, their lifetime, families better housing when they're children, the lifetime incomes go up by hundreds of thousands of dollars total. We also know that, as was already mentioned, that when you grow up in poverty in places like New York or other cities, that can shorten your lifespan by up to 7 years. So again, there's a moral imperative that we tackle these issues, but there's also an economic one. This is for our country to really gain its economic prosperity. We need to change these equations. That's why the San Francisco Fed is proud to be a founding member of SPARCC, proud to have been very involved from the beginning, and also very actively engaged in the search for answers to the very difficult issues that we've been talking about already today, and we'll talk about for the next, or work on for the next several years. Questions about how do we find ways to invest in our communities. It means that prosperity can be shared by all, regardless of your race or your zip code. That we can tackle income inequality and economic mobility problems that have gotten so bad in just the last few decades. Obviously, that we can find ways to take advantage of the diversity of our society and our culture that makes us so strong as a country. And I'm really excited that we're able to be part of this today and for the next several years. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll follow that with some opening remarks from Nancy Andrews from the Low Income Investment Fund, talking a bit about how community and health have been working side by side.
Sure, happy to do that, and it's just wonderful. As John said, it's just terrific to be here. Hats off to my colleagues and friends and all of the people that have worked for the last 4 years, I think, trying to put this together. And this has truly, truly been a collaborative effort, not just by organizations that are practitioners, but by the organizations that are also the investors and the champions and the cheerleaders. It's just been an extraordinary effort. And I hope that this moment where we're sort of trotting out and showing the wonderful examples, the videos, the discussions that we're having really can be a stimulus to all of us for what is possible. I also want to just to thank the Federal Reserve in San Francisco for having been such a strong voice in supporting us over the years in thinking about the new chapters and the new way of thinking about community development. And the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, who both, not just with money, but with friendship and with encouragement, have really encouraged those of us in community development to recognize the importance of what we're doing to the goals of health, to the goals of creating a culture of health. Risa alluded to a book that the Low Income Investment Fund published with the San Francisco Federal Reserve about 5 years ago. The book was called Investing in What Works for America's Communities. And the hypothesis at that moment in time, the hypothesis behind that book was that place by itself, investing just in place, investing just in housing or the built environment, that by itself wasn't enough, that we also had to add human capital, we had to add people in a very affirmative way into that question. And frankly, that led us, as we began to think about how do we not just invest in buildings, but how do we invest in the people that live in the buildings, that led us to open up our eyes and to hear a message that was coming to us from Robert Wood Johnson, was coming to us from our good friends at the Fed, David Erickson, who actually at one point did a brilliant thing of putting a heat map. Everybody knows what a heat map is, right? It's red is bad, blue is good. So David put up a heat map of almost any city that you go into in the United States. If you put up a heat map that shows where the concentrated problems with health are, and next door to that, you put up a heat map that shows where the concentrated problems of poverty are, and then you bring those two maps over on top of each other, you discover they are almost the identical same map. And what that did for me personally, it's a very personal story, was if a light bulb went off, and I suddenly began to understand that the places where we as community developer practitioners had been working for 30, 40 years were exactly the same places that our health colleagues had been working for many, many years. And when the lights went up and on, I suddenly realized that there were colleagues that I didn't know, there were friends that I hadn't yet made, and there was much, much work that we could do together. So that has been, I think, a super important chapter and recognition and understanding of what we can be in the future. SPARCC is central to that, and I think the third leg on the stool that we're beginning to put together is the insight that comes from realizing that if justice and fairness is not at the center of our agenda, then everything else that we're doing really doesn't matter. We can build all the housing that we want to build, we can invest in all the schools that we want to invest in, or in all the health services that we want to invest in. But if the people that live in those communities wake up every morning and they feel like the scales of society are really tilted against them, and they carry that feeling 24 hours a day, it really doesn't matter how many investments we make. So we need to integrate those things, all of those things together into a broader vision. I think that's what SPARCC is doing, it's beginning to do. I think of it as the next chapter in our work in American social progress, and I couldn't be more happy than to be here with you all today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And now Marian Standish from the California Endowment, which of course is, a huge influence on us in the Bay Area.
And ironically, we're all three of us, at least 4 of us, from the Bay Area. So salutes to our California colleagues out there. And congratulations to all of the 6 SPARCC communities, regions. It's really a very exciting opportunity that's in front of us. And I think many of us on the health side have been working to try to bring our various and diverse sectors together, from health to community development to the environment. And while those of you on the practitioner side have your own challenges, rest assured philanthropy has very, very similar challenges in trying to align and collaborate. But because of the leadership of our respective organizations, and I just want to call out Risa's leadership here from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, I think we've gone a tremendously long way in achieving that kind of collaboration at the philanthropic level. So our initiatives are far more aligned, and I think will have greater impact over the long run. It wasn't easy, but I think it's a new day, and I think SPARCC is a great example of that new day. I just want to make a couple of remarks coming out of the California Endowment's very deep place-based work in 14 communities in our state. This is a 10-year, $1 billion commitment that the foundation has made. These are 14 places that are not necessarily cities. Many of them are neighborhoods. South Los Angeles, for example, is one of our places, and while it's bigger than most cities, many cities, it in and of itself is not a city. And that effort was linked very intentionally to a state-level policy capacity and a very robust communications effort. And I want to speak for a moment coming out of our lessons learned. Coming out of our lessons learned. And I think what we've seen over the last 6 years is that change is happening. And I think we are very optimistic and enthusiastic, very hopeful about what this type of effort can produce, not just in terms of individual interventions and opportunities and outcomes, but real transformation. And I think that's what SPARCC is about, and I think that's why these lessons are so important. We've seen change in California in the healthcare arena, where the state has probably among the strongest and most effective implementations of the Affordable Care Act in the country. And we've seen reductions, dramatic reductions in the uninsured rates, especially among Black and Latino adults, adult men who typically don't participate in the healthcare system. We've effectively brought in undocumented children into our healthcare system. And I'm going to get to the why this matters in terms of lessons learned. We've seen changes in school climate. We've seen changes in the youth justice system, and we've seen significant changes in land use. But what are the key lessons that we've derived from these accomplishments? And while there are many, I just want to highlight a couple of them. The first is that our effort is really not simply about geography. It's not simply about your zip code, even though we know that's been a good marker for us, and it's a good way for us to talk about our work. But the power of place is really about the fact that it is where inequity, it's where injustice, it's where disparity, inequality really all come together, and they all show up. Whether it is about healthcare, whether it is about transit, whether it is about climate, whether it is about any housing, of course, any of the issues that we're talking about, place is where all of that shows up so powerfully. But for us, where it really came into play was in the dramatic impact that those injustices had on the actual experiences of real people. The pain, the trauma, the community-wide feeling of being left out. And you feel that, for example, if you're in a city like San Jose, California, where Silicon Valley and, the wealthiest people in the world are making money, and you can't even keep a health clinic open or can't find a grocery store. So that experience at the place level is really palpable, and it is very real. And those of you who are working at that level understand what I'm talking about. So it challenges all of our assumptions. And I know all of us have spent the last few years designing and developing this beautiful initiative called SPARCC. And I think it has every one of the ingredients for success. But it will challenge as we move into community. And if we're serious about engaging community, it will challenge all of our assumptions. And the ultimate lesson for us is to be less focused on what our outcome was, even though all of us want an outcome. And certainly those of us in the health world know 3 years isn't going to get us much of a health outcome. But that engaging community is really about building power and enabling and facilitating the true, and I mean true, voice of community, because it could take us down some paths that we don't anticipate. And we need to be open to that as we move forward, because ultimately we will see transformation as a result. And that's what health is really all about, and that's what our success will be all about. So that's our health connection.
Thank you. And power is a big health connection. We'll go now to Dawn, who, as a pediatrician and a philanthropist, how do you like that? Has a lot to say, I think, about the connection between health and community development.
Thanks, Melissa. I am going to start with an assumption that people who are here get the connection. You've heard about it this morning, but I think you probably came into the room with some general orientation toward the value proposition of health and community development and climate working together. But I want to shift the conversation. And I want you to begin by thinking about a requirement for poor folks in parts of the country. Imagine if we required that everyone had to own a car, and we didn't subsidize gasoline, and everybody had a car, and some could drive it and others couldn't. But because everybody had a car, there was an assumption that people could get to work. We'd call that really inequitable. And there would be a lot of discussion about who was responsible for people having access to gasoline. And some folks would say the people who are responsible for gasoline are all those people in the auto industry who are profiting from sale of automobiles, but not subsidizing gasoline. It's not exactly an externality argument, but it is an interesting argument about equity and who owns equity. I'm a pediatrician, and throughout my practice life, I saw a lot of children, also from Philadelphia, where Risa is from, who came from the kinds of neighborhoods like the neighborhood around the North Philadelphia train station. Early in my career, I was visited by a relatively young but terribly old-looking grandmother with a tiny baby in her arms. This infant had been in an intensive care unit for the first 90-plus days of life. And during that time, incredible technology that has taken us more than a half century to develop was deployed to keep this infant alive. And at the time of discharge, surprisingly, this infant was remarkably intact. She had been born at about 6 months gestation, and at that time in this country, that was particularly testy in terms of the ability of technology to create an intact child 3 months later. And this grandmother walked in with this baby who was blue and cold and still alive, but very much undernourished. We had spent $1.5 million assuring that that 6-month infant made it out of the hospital. And we discharged that infant to a home that was infested, that was mold encrusted, that was stormwater vulnerable, that had intermittent electricity despite all the devices that were needed to keep this child healthy, and had neither access to heat or air conditioning. Are hospitals like the automobile industry? The hospital made a 4% profit margin, on that infant. 4% is good for the auto industry, for the sale of a vehicle. We don't think of responsibility within the healthcare industry, for what happens after discharge. But maybe there's a responsibility, because people need healthcare, as would poor people need gasoline if we required people to have cars and work. We have a set of assumptions about healthcare that SPARCC has an opportunity to change, not by creating new responsibilities, but by creating new partnerships. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation insisted that SPARCC engage the healthcare sector in the 6 regions where we're deploying SPARCC. And everybody looked at us like we were crazy, because around the country, as we look at places where community development is thriving, over and over and over again, those in community development have tried to engage the healthcare sector and failed. The healthcare sector and the community development sector, as Risa said, one day, we believe, will be the same. But we're not going to get there without healthcare feeling a responsibility for community development, and community development understanding that vulnerable people who the healthcare sector creates, cares about, and maintains those people will never survive unless we build communities differently. That's what SPARCC's about. But SPARCC is not going to get to where we all need to get to from 6 regions. So the model of SPARCC says, not only do we have a learning community, but we have a vision that all of the partners and all of you are going to be able to work together to learn from SPARCC and take what we learn to build a value proposition that is strong enough and powerful enough that we transform both community development and health and climate to say we have one important value proposition around equity. And these are all pieces that have to work together in order for that value proposition to come true. So you are all deputized by SPARCC. Once you walked in the door, you had your cup of coffee, you had your whatever you ate that may not have been so healthy, but I'm forgiving everyone. Once you did that, you were deputized. Deputized to try to think about and learn from 6 places around the country that are going to try to deal with an incredibly complex set of issues with theories of change that could boggle the mind. But each of us has a responsibility to extract from that a piece that we articulate in a cogent way, and we use that to try to change the understandings and realities of each of our sectors. If we begin to do that, then there'll be people up here who aren't just from the Bay Area, but we'll have people from all around the country. But in addition, we will have changed the opportunity for a 35-year-old grandmother who's raising a very vulnerable infant to be able to do that in a way that we all feel comfortable will guarantee an incredibly healthy life for that baby.
Thank you. I want to move from there to questions or comments from the audience. Do people have cards or paper where they've written questions down? I see a bunch. As we're collecting those questions, I'll pose another, which is that the SPARCC cohorts have just spent several days together talking about our projects, all of us having pretty significant public investments coming into our neighborhoods and regions, and also are looking at the SPARCC resources and other resources and trying to think about the capital side of investment that relates to health. Are there lessons or models and ways that you've seen that used that that you'd like to share?
Capital? Is that something that we do?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I think that, number one, a little bit of humility. This is a somewhat new area for those of us in community development, so we're finding our way. There's a lot of testing and trying, and with that, a little bit of failing that's going on. But some of the things I like to talk about, a couple of stories. One, I see Judy Kendi, I saw in the room somewhere, that when Judy worked with LIF, she was instrumental in putting together a project in New Orleans that was in an area called the Mid-City Neighborhood. This is a community that is about 50% poor, poverty rate of about 50%. But this project had a soaring vision behind it. It was a multi-dimensional effort on the part of the city of New Orleans, on the part of a neighborhood developer to redevelop housing, and on the part of a collaboration called Refresh that was bringing healthy food into the community with a small footprint Whole Foods store. Job training for young people in the community through something called Liberty's Kitchen, a collaboration with Tulane University Medical Center to teach doctors and residents how to prepare good nutrition and how to prepare healthy foods and how to interact in a way that was actually training docs to work with the client population. And also, on top of that, a school management organization. So multiple threads being brought together in a single place. It also engaged the private sector, philanthropy, and the city. And what was going on was that people were a little bit stuck at the closing table. They had all of the pieces, but as they came together, they discovered that each partner had differences too, and they had to figure out how to work through those differences in a way that would make this investment come together. The role of an organization like the Low Income Investment Fund or Enterprise or our many partners in community development finance across the country is often a little bit of a Yenta role. We're trying to do kind of a matchmaking of capital. And so when you have partners that each have different requirements and can't quite find their way to bridge to one another, sometimes what we do is we try to create what I call the glue capital. It's the capital that kind of smooths off the rough edges of each other's requirements. And so we did that at LIF. We did that using our healthy food financing funds. And what we did is what I call, we went to the bottom of the dog pile. We were very happy. We saw all these partners that couldn't get along, and so we said, we're just going to subordinate to all of you if you'll just come together. So we went to the bottom of the dog pile, and when we were willing to do that, little by little, each partner gave enough that they could make each other come to the table. And we had that deal done within a year. So I think that's a great example of how it's possible to use private capital, but also you need creative capital alongside it to try to bring the pieces together and make these very visionary projects come to life and have a future.
I was going to add patient capital.
And patient, it was
Yes.
20-year capital, by the way.
So one of the questions from the audience is about the time period of SPARCC. And 3 years go by fast. And we have an initiative in the room that's ending their first round of a similar initiative. How do you think now about how to sustain the work beyond the 3-year period?
Well, I'll just jump in. I think, as I understand it, forging these relationships is really what will sustain the work. It can't, I mean, the resources matter, and presumably there will be more resources down the road, But I think the relationships are the critical piece that will really hold these efforts together. None of these organizations are leaving these communities, and they're going to learn to work with new partners in very powerful ways. And that will, I think, inspire continued collaboration.
Can I jump in on that a little bit too, and just say that I have absolutely every confidence in the folks that are in the room in making this stuff work. And I think that as we give it life and oxygen and breath, we will get positive stories that will come out of that will be compelling. We'll probably also get a few things that don't work so well. And that's great, that's fine, because part of this process is creating a learning community, a learning opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so giving it a little bit of life, I think, means that 3 years from now, we will have very compelling information and very compelling progress that I am confident we will continue to earn the confidence of the funders and attract them in. And remember, there are trillions of dollars that are at stake here. There is money that's going to be going into these communities. If we spend that money in what I call business as usual, we're going to find ourselves with growing segregation, with people being pushed out and left behind. So frankly, we don't have a choice. We have to figure out how to invest in ways that reverse that dynamic. And I think that's what SPARCC's all about, and I am completely confident that it will continue beyond.
Okay. And we have a number of questions that relate in different ways to the Affordable Care Act, so I'm going to close with these questions. And there's a few. One is, have you considered supporting research or advocacy on the Affordable Care Act mandates for community needs assessment and community benefit centers, or community benefits dollars by hospitals? Another is about the question of the recent repeal that has failed, and if there is a view or a support for single payer, and feeling that there's a moment for that now. Why don't we take those two? The others are versions of those kinds of questions.
So I think we know about as much in terms of what the Affordable Care Act will look like in a year as we know about everything else. And as a result, I am not going to comment on single payer, but everyone can talk to your neighbor about that, because I think your neighbor will know as much as I do about whether we will have a single payer system sooner or later because of what's happening today, tomorrow, and next week regarding the Affordable Care Act. But I don't mean in any way to minimize the importance of that question. What I will say about community benefit is that remember that the penalties at the moment for hospitals that don't do what's required of them around community benefit are really pretty small and meager. And when the standards for community benefit were put forward, I think the expectation was that this might nudge hospitals, but it wasn't meant to be as big a hammer. What was a bigger hammer was changes in reimbursement patterns. So people who have to come back to hospitals within 30 days after discharge, the hospital doesn't get reimbursed. So a lot of folks are focused on community benefit from the outside, because that's an opportunity for folks on the outside to get into hospitals for conversations. And it's an opportunity for hospitals to learn about and begin to think about what they can do as partners with communities. I don't believe that's going to change. I think that the value proposition for hospitals, as we talk to hospitals and health systems across the country, has been made. The question of how much they can invest in change is an open one that's going to depend a lot on reimbursement and any change that happens with the Affordable Care Act. But the value proposition for partnerships and understanding and beginning to step outside the walls of hospitals to do things with communities in order to improve the health of the people who they care for, I think is there. It's been made. It's going to go forward. So I'm very optimistic about that. I don't want to say anything about single payer or the ACA, but I do think community benefit is part of our culture.
Just to add to Don's point here, I think, and Darren said this earlier, that SPARCC creates a platform for collaboration. And in the healthcare arena, which has been sort of walled off in many ways from community, having a platform, having a vehicle that would enable their participation in broader community activity, I think is essential. Without that, then they are using their community benefit resources for little fragmented activities that are good but don't really amount to the type of transformation that we're after. So I think the creation of the SPARCC platform is a tremendous innovation and opportunity to bring the healthcare sector to the table in some very meaningful and resourced ways.
Well, good. Let's thank our panelists.
Lauren, do they need anything else? Or they all going to speak? You guys want?
All right. Thank you, health panelists. We're going to jump right into our final two site spotlights. We're going to start with Los Angeles and then go right into Memphis. And so here's LA.
Thank you, everybody. So good afternoon. I'm Isela Gracian, president of East LA Community Corporation, and here with SPARCC LA and my colleagues Woodrow and Sissy, and you will hear from them in a little bit. So for Los Angeles is transforming thanks to billions that voters have approved for transportation, housing, and state climate. And like our peers, we're feeling the pressures of the housing crisis, low wages, and displacement. And low-income people of color live in the neighborhoods most likely to transform. And they're also the most likely to gain from that transformation or the most likely to lose if they are displaced from their home and their community. ACT LA and LA Thrives, we joined forces to form SPARCC LA to ensure our communities are part of the movement for change that uplifts Angelenos. In Boyle Heights, a predominantly Latino migrant neighborhood east of downtown, where we, ELAC, base our work, you can walk down just about any street and be able to take in the murals, the roaming musicians, enjoy the cuisine, and exchange a buenos dias with someone you're passing down on the sidewalk. And the thought of losing all of this is painful for all of the residents we work with. And Guillermina, one of our resident leaders, during one of our landscape analysis sessions with residents, we were asking ourselves, like, why do we do this work? Why are we engaging in this challenge? And she put it very nicely. We do it for the people, because our neighborhood's greatest treasure is its people. And we were looking at the different points of intervention that would serve the greatest amount of people, and we landed on land use planning and development along transit. And as we were doing that work, we came together with partners, and we identified that our neighborhood fights would only get us so far in achieving the equity we wanted to see in Los Angeles. And I know that Los Angeles for some can feel overwhelming, so many unique neighborhoods, 88 cities, various jurisdictions. However, what ties our work together is simple. It comes to our people. It's our drive to achieve equity for the most vulnerable of our neighbors, friends, and family. At a neighborhood level, we reach thousands. At a city level, tens of thousands. And at a regional level, hundreds of thousands. And SPARCC LA scales up our impact to create a new playing field where Angelenos can thrive. And I'll pass it to Woodrow Curry from Uplift Inglewood, and he'll share about a literal playing field that's being planned in his neighborhood and how residents are coming together for accountable, community-driven development.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So my name is Woodrow Curry, and I'm from the beautiful city of Inglewood, California. I am also, I'm an organizer, but I'm also what some might call a millennial. So please allow me to take just one quick second and take a selfie with you all beautiful people in this room real quick. If you all can give me a thumbs up or a wave, say we all thrive on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you. You know, we do love to take selfies, us millennials. All right. So I am Woodrow Curry III, and like I said, I'm an organizer. I'm also a resident of the city of Inglewood and a co-founder and lead organizer with Uplift Inglewood, a grassroots coalition of activists in the city. As you fly into LAX, how many have flown into LAX? Okay, yeah, good. As you fly into LAX, Inglewood is the last city you'll see as you look out the window before you land. As you move westward, Inglewood is the last working class city of color you'll see before reaching beach cities like Redondo, Hermosa, and Manhattan Beach. Now, I live near the intersection of Prairie Avenue and Manchester Boulevard, right near what was once called the Great Western Forum. Now, that's 3/4 of a mile from the new La Brea and Florence Metro Station and steps from the site of the new LA Rams and Chargers Stadium. Within the first 6 months after the stadium's announcement, rents in my building increased twice. After 5 years with no rent increases and no capital improvements to the property. Due to the Crenshaw Metro line and the Rams and Chargers Stadium, which is not just a stadium, folks. It actually includes 2,500 market rate luxury housing units, 8.5 million square feet of office and retail space, a lake, a multiplex theater, a luxury hotel. All of that coupled with the fact that we don't have any tenant protections or access to affordable housing. The threat of gentrification in Inglewood is real. As for myself, like I said, I'm an organizer. After winning campaigns and building power amongst workers and their families, as a labor organizer across the state of California, I shifted my focus on my own community, identifying ways to build grassroots power closer to home. After rents in our building increased, my wife Simone and I began to talk to other residents and organize what is now called Uplift Inglewood. Our purpose is to strengthen Inglewood residents' political power through education, advocacy, and direct organizing. Our demands are people and community-centered, affirming the right to truly affordable housing and safe, thriving neighborhoods. We organize for sustainable community investment while standing against mass evictions, displacement, and the effects of gentrification. Through Uplift Inglewood, we are combating the effects of gentrification and displacement while building a vision for Inglewood. And that includes uplifting the most vulnerable of our city. Thanks to LA Thrives and SPARCC LA, we are now connected with other organizations across the LA region, which has helped us to broaden our scope, the scope of our work. And together we recognize that displacement is a disjustice. I'll say it again. Displacement is a disjustice. And now we can hop on that Crenshaw line and head on over to Chinatown. I'd like to introduce Sissy Trin, a member of the Southeast Asian Community Alliance.
Good So LA is huge. We all know that. It's complicated. It's diverse. There are over 200 languages spoken. But the one thing that unites our entire region is water. We don't have enough of it, and what we do have, we can't store. And so one of the projects that I've been working on is the LA River Restoration, which by the end of the process will bring 2,300 new acres of open space and reduce our water imports by 14%. However, it has also brought massive real estate speculation. Prices have doubled in 2 years, and for our communities, Chinatown and Lincoln Heights, gentrification no longer means displacement, it means homelessness. And so about 4 years ago, we started talking to some river stakeholders about what was happening. And the response we got was, well, that's outside of our wheelhouse. Or, well, gentrification is an intractable issue. What can you do about it? But we work with low-income youth of color, and I was having students come to me and say, Sissy, can you help me find a job? I need to help pay for rent. These were 14-year-old kids. So of course I can't say, this is an intractable issue or it's outside of my wheelhouse. So we started learning about land use. We surveyed our communities, talked to our neighbors, and then in this photo here, our high school students, they were about 16 at the time, are teaching each other about floor area ratios and density bonuses because they needed to understand the impacts of what development means, right? The good and the bad, and where can we minimize the bad and maximize the good. And of course, we built all kinds of coalitions because there's no real grassroots organizing in our neighborhoods. And so we talked to anybody who was willing to listen. And so one day, I met our fairy godmother. Her name is Amy Lethbridge, and she is the deputy director of the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. They are a public agency that holds about 70,000 acres of open space in LA and Ventura County. And the last 15 years, they've been building a lot of parks in low-income communities of color, utilizing a park equity framework. However, they were getting a lot of pushback. People were saying, we don't want this in our neighborhood. We don't want a park in our neighborhood because we're afraid of gentrification. And so the organization could have said, that's outside of our wheelhouse. Instead, they said, if we are causing gentrification by making these neighborhoods nicer, then we are not doing our job. And so when Amy and I met, and I told her about the work we do, her eyes lit up, and she was like, can you help us? So of course I said yes. And so for the past year, we've been doing a number of different things together. We've been looking at land use legislation, public finance, and also joint development. How do you build parks and housing together utilizing climate dollars? Part of the process, what we've discovered is if you build it together, you actually get more of each than if you build them separately. And so these kinds of collaborations are what's happening in LA. We're also, last year, we partnered with the building trades unions for Build Better LA, a local citywide land use ordinance that is leveraging the luxury housing boom to get better jobs, more good jobs, and affordable housing. And we're also working with our Metro, our regional transit agency, to create capital tools for affordable housing next to transit. But these collaborations aren't really enough, right? At SPARCC LA, we really believe that collaborations without community at the center are not going to get the outcomes that we need. And so for us, we start with community, we lead with racial and economic justice, and then we believe that the outcomes will be better when it comes to climate and health and jobs and transportation. Cue video.
Uso el tren o el camión. I'm part of it actually because I want a future for LA that is promotes equality and sustainability. Yo quiero un futuro para Los Ángeles que sea sostenible y igual para todos, igual para todas. And we develop LA, that's the one I want to actually.
So
My name is Diane Valencia. I'm born and raised in LA, and I'm now a youth organizer in Chinatown. I contribute to this city because I work in a neighborhood where low-income, immigrant, refugee people are ignored and overlooked.
Apologize. This is we were going to show a different video, so apologize for that. So we can share it out at another time. But thank you all. Thank you, SPARCC, for being here. We're really excited to be able to continue to work with all of our cohorts and peers across the country on the SPARCC project. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I don't know whether it's still morning or afternoon, but good morning, good afternoon. I'm Aziza Obewi-Risher. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I work with the Klondike Smoky City CDC. This is Lakeisha Harrison. She's with the Memphis Urban League. And we're going to tell you a little bit about Memphis and where we're headed with SPARCC. Unlike a lot of the cities you've seen here, we don't have a lot to really brag about. SPARCC has given us an opportunity to begin to collaborate. Memphis is the city where Dr. Martin Luther King was killed in 1968. If you know anything about slavery, part of the breaking process was to punish a slave in front of the whole crowd so that you could get control over the people. So in a sense, that's what's happened in Memphis. It's been very quiet. Everybody's been afraid and gone inward. But this has given us a spark, some fire to get back out there and make some things happen. This was our send-off just this month with our mayor. We got our mayor to do, what do you call it? Proclamation. Not quite that, but anyway, we'll let him know that we're here. We'll let him know that we're here in Memphis and we're about business. And we have some slides. I'm just kind of go through them, but they basically show you the land area of Memphis. Actually, we are surrounded by two other states, Mississippi and Arkansas, and a lot of things that go on in Memphis benefit those states. The area we've chosen to work with SPARCC is the North Memphis area. It at one time was an industrial area, home to Firestone Tire and Rubber, Vesical Chemical, Buckeye Cellulose, Plow Incorporated, a lot of industries that provided jobs for the people in those communities. Most of the housing in that area was for the people who worked in those areas. I'm from the Klondike Smoky City area, and Smoky City got its name from the blacksmiths that live there in that area. They shoot all the horses, and you can see the smoke coming up. That area of town is very, very historical, something that has not been talked about in Memphis. There's so much history in my city that it's just been swept under the rug. So we're going to wake it up, and we're going to bring those things out. I'm not going to take too much time because we've been told to condense it. We're running out of time, but I just want to let you know that we are here. Next time, we're going to have videos and the whole 9 yards.
Afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to kind of speed through and get to the catalytic moments which got us here to SPARCC. It's a lot of slides. Okay, there we go. So this map is showing you basically the outline of the focus area that is North Memphis. Within that area, there are 22 distinct neighborhoods, and there probably are a couple more that we don't really know or have identified yet. And those stars that you see are the catalytic moments, and all of those stars sit on the boundaries of our North Memphis neighborhood. So the first catalytic moment that we have was caused by when the Mississippi River crested in Memphis. And I'm sure you guys heard the news when CNN covered it, and it made it seem like the whole town was underwater. I actually had relatives calling me, "Are you okay?" And I actually live like on the southeast end, like 40 minutes away from the river. But we got a lot of coverage about how bad our flooding was and how it was affecting our downtown community. Here is the proposed plan of how to fix that. Memphis and the region actually competed in the National Disaster Resiliency Competition, which was a large, probably $70 million grant or more that is focused on fixing our wetlands and helping ease our flood issues. Those flood issues are actually not necessarily within the North Memphis area, but they are on the boundaries that affects those residents in those neighborhoods, and the plans for that skirt through not only North Memphis, but in other northern regions of Shelby County and Memphis. The next is our other famous and well-known Memphis organization, which is St. Jude. I'm sure you've all seen the commercials and the celebrities, and St. Jude does wonderful work in our community, and they have committed to investing $9 billion. St. Jude sits within North Memphis, but it also has they have also acquired land and property in North Memphis. Their plan is to add 2,000 jobs to the Memphis area. The last one is the Crosstown Concourse. Crosstown Concourse is the revitalization of the old Sears distribution center. And that is not in North Memphis. It's on the outskirts as well, but it is deemed as an urban vertical village. Not only will it have shopping, it's residential, there's a high school that's going to be in there, there's arts and culture that is going to be incorporated in that. So we look at our opportunities as we gather as a Memphis Partners is not to try to hop on to what is already in place, but to capitalize on the fact that we now get to give that community a voice to step in as these catalytic moments progress. Some of those are already in place, some of those are in the beginning stages of that. But we have the unique opportunity to say to not only our organizations within the community, those that are outside of the community and interact with our residents, and our political representatives, that we have a vision and now you're going to hear us. We look at, Memphis is one of the busiest transportation and logistics hubs in the country. And it's the second busiest cargo airport in the world, and we have 5 major railroads. When you look at what that says to the country, it gives us an opportunity to start using that within our communities. What you're looking at is how our North Memphis community is already doing things. The barber school brought needed job skills to North Memphis. As SPARCC, a part of a SPARCC cohort, we don't want to stop what's going on. We want to help build the capacity of these neighborhoods to keep doing things like this. And, and I'm going to end it there. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity, and we look forward to working with all of our SPARCC cohorts.
Great, if the panelists could come up. Timekeeper, how are we? Yeah, I've never started a panel after it was supposed to finish. But I think we will take our time and really finish this out with a bang. So before we get started, though, I would like everyone to submit your questions now. You know what we're about to talk about. You came here for a purpose today, so write on your card right now what your questions are, and we'll have those, hopefully, just so if you can just start walking down and collect those. Then by the time I take my seat, we'll already have your questions, and we can launch right into it. The JPB, I'm Dana Borland with the JPB Foundation, and Nancy, I think I was actually still at Enterprise when I heard about SPARCC, which was almost 5 years ago. So this is a very, very special day. And I know our president, Barbara Pickauer, wishes she could be here today. SPARCC just sort of really brings to life our very core values at JPB of working together in collaboration and attacking these really complex issues in their complexity. And so we're thrilled to be a partner of SPARCC. And, you know, where we're going to end today is really talking about the environment, which sizably and measurably impacts human and natural systems, health, and well-being. So the panel today is going to really look at how we create equity and opportunity that benefits both people and the planet. And so we have Rip Rapson, a longtime hero of mine from his early days of protecting one of my favorite places in the world, the Boundary Area Waters Canoe Area up in Minnesota. But as president now of the Kresge Foundation, he's really repositioning this 92-year-old institution to tackle these issues in their full complexity, and is really leading the way in philanthropy as he undertakes things such as the Grand Bargain and Detroit and other initiatives I'm sure we'll hear about. And Ria is an emerging heroine of mine. We're just getting to know each other through some work we're doing around energy efficiency for all. But as president of NRDC, with 500 plus scientists and lawyers and just some of the best staff I've had the fortune of working with, she's really looking at how to make one of the country's most effective environmental organizations also play a leading role in building more equity and alignment in the environmental movement. And Nathaniel Smith, who's the Chief Equity Officer at the Partnership for Southern Equity and Director of Partnerships for Equitable Development at Emory University Center for Community Partnership. We just met today, but I've heard of your great work in your role of really facilitating more balanced and sustainable, inclusive development across the Atlanta region. So we have a great panel. But please, I want your questions now so we can jump right in. Okay, do you mind if we do this? We have pre-prepared questions, but I think you'll get your words in by answering questions. We already have so many, so let me just see if there's one or two we can get started with. While racial equity is clearly an issue, what would you say to the urban poor white population who hears about attention, investment for people of color and feels left behind? Now that doesn't quite hit our theme outright of addressing environmental equity, but it does. I mean, these issues are really intertwined, and we're really trying to embrace the complexity. So I think it does actually directly relate to what we're talking about.
So let me first thank the funders and partners who have come together in such a critical time to create SPARCC, and also a shout out to my ATL crew that are here and a part of the SPARCC network in Atlanta. In actuality, as I attempt to do the work, one of the main figures in my life that has guided me, of course, is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he was a son of Atlanta, a graduate of Morehouse College, and one of the preeminent voices for justice during the civil rights movement. You know, Dana, he had a saying or a mantra that he would utilize called the network of mutuality. that we are bound together by this network of mutuality, and that what affects one directly affects all indirectly. And I would say to communities that may not necessarily understand, in particular, with this conversation around climate and sustainability, or whether it be economic inclusion or access, that what happens on the south side does affect what happens on the north side. What happens on the east side affects what happens on the west side. And because of the political culture that we are experiencing in America today, a culture of otherness, of looking at the other as the enemy, we've minimized our opportunity to come together as a human family and begin the process of implementing policies that are not only good for our planet, but good for everybody.
Maybe I could take it in a slightly different direction and steal shamelessly from something Ria said to our board just a couple of weeks ago when she spoke to us. My sense is that the power of the local models that we've seen today is just stunning. And then the imperatives of the sort of the broad overarching issues of equity, using these community-based opportunities as a way of drawing in the environmental movement, as a way of drawing in health systems, sort of raises the question of how do we organize our work in the sort of next era of whatever this next era is going to be. And what Ria suggested, forgive me, Ria, you can do this better in a moment, but what Ria suggested, sorry, I hope this is what Ria suggested, is that we have a moment in which the power of interweaving movement building is really profound. That one of the things that we've tried to do at Kresge is to try to draw together the social justice community and the environmental community. I think, as Shelley said earlier, drawing our environmental movement into the places we live and we work. And the possibility of creating a sort of a set of mobilizing structures that is actually doing work that matters in local places, but that demonstrates a different sensibility about how you cross disciplines. It's not just sort of a technical exercise in creating a transit-oriented development project. It's a way of thinking about how you make community change. And I think we've heard that all day, that this is about power relationships, it's about decision-making capacity, it's about the integration of public and private and civic institutions into sort of one broad problem-solving table. And I just think that I can't look at these models and not think that in many ways they are the future of our community. Does that then drop down into Detroit and into New Orleans, into other communities that aren't part of the cohort? Absolutely. I was actually thinking that I could sort of tick through the 5 or 6 themes that have so powerfully been articulated today and apply them directly into Detroit. It's quite extraordinary, because even though these are communities that are you are communities that are well on your way to true innovation, it has direct application for folks who are dealing with less resources, fewer resources, who have different political structures. I mean, the differences are important, but they aren't determinative. And so that's one way I would answer the question, is I think we really have a moment in which not only can we, but we must weave across these different movement-building opportunities.
Ria, I'm going to go to another question, and then you can answer Rip or his quote of you and correct it, or riff on your own quote. But I think a couple of the questions speak to timing. And given everything that's going on in our world, and specifically here domestically, why SPARCC, but why the climate? Why now? Why bringing these issues together now?
So let me just start off by saying thank you for having me here. It's a tremendously exciting day after many, many years of planning. It's just fantastic to see this finally launched. I guess I'll answer that question by acknowledging the reality that these are dark, dark days. I will personally admit that I am trying almost every day to kind of get over it, and yet every day there's a fresh new horror that is even more surprising. So I'm like surprised all the time, and I just got to get over it at some point. Although there's probably a good part of not getting over it, right, that we all need to kind of hang on to. But in these dark days that we find ourselves in, SPARCC, what's happening with SPARCC, what's happening in the communities associated with SPARCC are not only the beacons of light, they are showing us the path forward, right? I was having a conversation with some staff earlier today about some work we're doing in California, and I was saying, look, progress cannot be stopped, and we cannot be stopped. And I think SPARCC will demonstrate on a very profound and meaningful and powerful level that the work that we're doing here has legs, the work that we're doing here will be transformative, and the work that we're doing here will not be stopped.
A couple of the other questions are asking about the connectivity, really, between the community development conversations we've been having today and the environmental sector. And, I think so oftentimes, maybe historically, we've been so focused on the benefit and sort of the pending capital project, to get the ribbon cut, get the project done, bring that one benefit. But even what you were talking about, Ria, we no longer have that luxury of thinking about these issues in their individual silos, of providing housing without access to nature, or just asphalting over a river because it's just too polluted. And, so maybe you could each address these other questions that really are asking what's the importance of this connection of bringing environmental interventions with community development interventions?
Well, I was struck by a number of comments this morning that essentially asked the question of why is this different from past comprehensive community development initiatives? And I go back a long way to 5 or 6 sort of major efforts to do it. And I think Darren pegged it. The isolation of the disciplines, the isolation of the sectors, the isolation of the sort of the on-the-ground decision-making processes was a sort of an inherent artificiality. You couldn't break through to sort of long-term enduring change unless you began to understand that these are all kind of ricocheting against each other. And I think Don's example was perfect. Health bangs into transportation, bangs into income supports, bangs into housing. And I think this is fundamentally different in a way that, and I've been doing this work for 25 years, I don't think we've ever seen this kind of horizontal integration, both at the community level, but I think one of the things we haven't talked as much about is also vertically. You have NRDC, you have LIF, you have all of these partners who are as good at what they do as anyone in the country, and the possibility of sort of integrating this sort of deep technical expertise with this sort of broad coalition building going on at the local level is a really powerful model that I don't think we've seen in the community development field for at least since I've been in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I'll also say, just to be completely transparent, I think within the context of the community development world, in many places in urban areas around the country, development has happened to people and not with people. Within the context of our environmental conversation, it has been a majority white conversation that has left out communities of color and have not leveraged the passion and the history of people of color in engaging in critical conversations about resiliency and about the environment. My biggest concern and why SPARCC is so critical and important is that while we may work to weave these various interests together, without the authentic voices of people of color who have fought this fight in America for the past 400 years and through blood, sweat, and tears made America great, we will not have an opportunity to move in the policy way that we need to move in order to make a community for everyone. One case in particular, I would say, is really this conversation around resiliency. And it's funny how it really depends on what side of the spectrum you are in terms of how you see resiliency. For well-heeled individuals who look at the term resiliency, they think about being able to manage the shocks of our environment or economy or social impacts. For people that live in the hood, resiliency means I'm still here. They have lived in communities for decades without any real investments or really any real support systems. And so SPARCC actually creates an opportunity to minimize what we've seen through the community development boom that is happening in urban areas, where fiscal policy and the resources that have been leveraged off of the backs of poor folks have been used to create new markets that are now pushing them out. If we don't, and they're not strategic about the conversation about climate and resiliency, we're going to see again new policies that are being initiated like green infrastructure, policies that focus on gray infrastructure, policies that focus on, solar or wind as we now move into our new green energy economy that will be positioned in a way to not only leave folks of color behind, but exploit folks of color and move them aside so new economies and new communities can grow off of the backs of the people that have suffered. So that is my concern and why SPARCC is so critical and important.
Yeah, well said. Well said. We have a question here. Rhea, I'm going to direct it towards you at first. If we're able to move the needle on equity, how do we keep environmental justice leaders and their organizations at this collaborative table? And I think some might view NRDC as sort of an odd partner at this table. So maybe you can speak to your work and just how you might answer that question from your experience.
Sure. Let me suggest one thing. If there is one thing that you remember from what I say, this conversation today, today's celebratory events about environmental organizations or about the environment, it's this. Environmental rights are human rights, and they always have been. The whatever term we want to use now, intersectionality, community-based focus, these are central to why the environmental movement was created in the first place. And I think over the course of time, different environmental organizations have evolved in different ways, but make no mistake about it, and I'll speak for NRDC, the heart and the soul of our mission is around the pursuit of justice, around the pursuit of equitable rights for all. And so finding the opportunities where that actually comes so clearly into the fore with SPARCC is incredibly exciting, but it is also, again, it's bringing us back home. It's fulfilling the basic core of the mission that we were created to pursue. So I can't wait to be at lots of different meetings in the future with lots of different community rights organizations, whatever it may be, and not have the question posed to me, as an environmentalist, why are you here? I hope today is the last day that happens, and I hope we prove through the work of SPARCC why that shouldn't be the case. I don't want to not answer the other question that you had, Dana, which is how we can ensure that all of the environmental movements, organizations are appropriately represented at the table. This has been a long-standing tension amongst what's called kind of mainstream big environmental groups and community-based environmental justice groups. I think, frankly, the fact that I'm sitting next to Rip, a leader at the Kresge Foundation, the fact that Darren was here, the fact that there are so many funder partners in the room, there's an acknowledgement, right, that you can't simply set the table without having the right members or the right constituencies invited to that table. And so thinking through the opportunities, not only of how that table should be set, but how organizations like NRDC should create the room and the space and the opportunity for our partners to appropriately be next to us or leading in the conversations around environment, around climate, around equity. I think it's a reframing for funders, it's a reframing for environmental organizations, and it's perhaps a reframing for community-based organizations.
I just wanted to continue to speak on behalf of RIA. I think the reframing she just referenced is sort of nowhere more powerfully demonstrated in a settlement that NRDC just brokered. So is Flint a community development issue? Yeah. Is it a health issue? Yeah. Is it an environmental issue? I don't know. But NRDC was the entity that worked with the ACLU to sort of drive a suit that brought the state of Michigan as well as the United States government to the table to bring justice to the residents of Flint. And I guess got an $87 million settlement that'll remediate 18,000 pipes. It simply would not have happened without NRDC's lens and skill. It was really an extraordinary demonstration, I think, of exactly what she's talked about.
As we've been diving into the various sites and meetings that have come about over the past year or more, it does seem, though, that locally some of the communities aren't as prone to sort of lead with solutions around climate resilience. Why do you think that is, or how do you see that changing?
Maybe I could just speak from our experience at Kresge. When I first came to Kresge, our environmental program was providing capital support to zoos. We then brought...
to zoos?
Yeah.
Zoos.
Yeah, aquaria, you pick it, we did it. Which was fine, nothing wrong with zoos. But the point is that then we felt that it was important to sort of move into some kind of environmental space, and we sort of did, I think, what many good environmental funders did. We sort of identified energy and renewable resources and water quality in the upper Midwest, and then it struck us that if Kresge was going to be about urban opportunity for low-income people, which is essentially our organizing principle, that we needed to ask of our environmental team to align to that goal. And what we've done is to try to figure out how essentially low-income people who are disproportionately affected by climate change have a meaningful, pivotal voice in the decisions that affect their future. And at first, our trustees sort of raised their hand and said, look, you've got Sierra over here and all these other organizations that have traditionally been sort of technocratic or removed from these sort of social justice issues. It's never going to work. And so we put out an RFP, got, I don't know, however many, hundreds and hundreds of responses back, and are now working with 17 communities in which the social justice movement is inextricably interwoven with the environmental movement. It's not your grandmother's environmental movement, it's not the Kresge environmental movement, but it's the environmental movement. And it's a very interesting blend. And what we're finding is that if it is framed as problem solving, as it was in Flint, as opposed to an environmental issue or a health issue or some combination of the two, if it's simply certifying a problem that needs to be cracked, you can't often crack it without an environmental lens. It just doesn't make any sense. It won't endure. It can't be sustained. And so I think SPARCC has much that same kind of potential, just demonstrating on the ground every day in these 6 communities that these are inextricably interwoven.
I'll always also say that, one of the things that I always say about equity is that equity is not just a what, it is a way. It is a way to do the work that is different than the past, that is inclusive of all voices and creates a platform for the marginalized to be in a position of power in decision-making processes. And so if SPARCC and other folks in philanthropy are committed to the what of equity, it's also important for philanthropy to commit to the way of equity. And what do I mean by that? Focusing on supporting and galvanizing frontline organizations. not just leaders, but actually focusing on strengthening institutions on the front lines that are focusing on issues of climate, energy, equity, economy, housing, to begin the process of creating that ecosystem on the front lines. We can't just continue to give dollars to people that you know or trust. Right? You have to begin to go into communities, build the capacity that needs to be created in order to move the work forward in a real and different way. Recently, my organization had a conference called the Just Energy Summit in Atlanta, where we had hundreds of people of color in the room talking about climate and energy issues, not just because we sent an invite, but because for the first few months, we actually had grassroots, on the ground conversations with people of color about energy systems, why it is important to them, why they need to get engaged, and really to get them to understand that power in itself is a double entendre, right? That it's not just about light bulbs or energy efficiency. It's about galvanizing communities of color in a way to build power in a way that will influence policy decision making. Right. So we have to begin to live the way of equity and not just, what is equity? And I think the more that philanthropy, the more that partners, the more that intermediaries really understand that, I think the more we'll have a chance to have a more diverse dinner party with different folks around the table partaking on the meal of economic and social environmental prosperity.
Terrific. We're in our last go around, so I'm going to try and bring two questions together under one. If you could each address it in your own closing remarks. There seems to be questions about the dollar amount behind SPARCC, really probably not being enough, and wondering how SPARCC will focus other financing on these climate resilience projects, and really, how can SPARCC play a role as federal programs and subsidies are most likely rolling back. So if you could speak to some of the financing and budget issues of SPARCC in your closing remarks in 30 seconds, whoever wants to get us started.
Hey, that's a great, energizing final question. But quite seriously, I think it was part of RISA's genius to make sure that there was a huge social investment component of this project. Because at the end of the day, given the numbers that were thrown up on the board, 12 billion, 13 billion, 9 billion, this is all about leverage. And somehow figuring out how to use non-traditional philanthropic capital to unlock different forms of capital, bringing markets, bringing other kinds of investors into the game, I think is going to be hugely important. I think the grant support is tremendously important to kind of create the backbone support that the organizations need. But ultimately, the only way we reach the kinds of results that were articulated throughout the day was when you begin to get larger market forces, larger flows of capital into the mix. So I think it was to Robert Wood Johnson's enormous credit that they put that front and center.
So I'll turn the tables and I'll say what he said. That was really good. Just maybe one additional point. There is a pretty substantial amount of private philanthropy that's dedicated to climate change. There needs to be more of it overall. But if you look at if you look at what that money is actually funding, it's not this work. So there's an opportunity, I think, to make the case that the theory of change for how you solve the climate problem domestically or internationally rests in the hands of communities. So pursuing that, I think, is an additional opportunity to bring new financing and new money to the table.
And I would just piggyback off that, while there is, of course, a growing group of philanthropic organizations that are beginning to look at the challenge of climate change, I think to piggyback and support what you're saying, that we need more funders that are committed to climate justice. and really beginning to understand that this question of justice as it relates to the built environment, as it relates to our economy, as it relates to our environment, is really the central issue of our time. And if you really want to begin the process of influencing the systems that are perpetuating the inequities that we see, whether it be around the environment or other areas, that you have to be willing to put people first and put people who have worked so hard to survive on a day-to-day basis at the center of the conversation. Without that willingness to do that, it's going to be very, very difficult to push back against the regressive policies that we're experiencing on the federal level.
Terrific. And we've heard that so loud and clear that SPARCC is really putting people first, community-led voices. So thanks for your terrific remarks and rolling with the punches here at the end of the day. Thank you.
All right, I'm Melinda Pollack. I'm with Enterprise Community Partners, and I am joined by John Moon with the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank. And we are going to hurry up and close this out because every time someone comes up here, they add like 3 more years to the development process with SPARCC. And so we're going to get you out of here for lunch before it's like a 25-year process. So real quickly, I'm going to try to synthesize a few of the high points of today. So you've heard this morning what brought us together. You've heard why and how we'll all do better when everyone thrives. You've heard within our exemplary 6 regions why we need to work towards there being no more 2 Atlantas, why there can be no strong, prosperous Memphis without North Memphis, why we need to work towards a Chicago that no longer quantifies the cost of segregation by the billions, and where Bay Area's residents aren't saving $1 on housing to then spend 77 new, less healthy, resilient cents on transportation. Where the cranes in Denver's sky contribute to community-informed investments in places that make space for all. And last, when you look down while flying into LAX, that city that you see has transit, a stadium, and also truly affordable housing, safe, thriving neighborhoods for everyone. We're doing all this to demonstrate that when we change systems, progress no longer has to be a threat because our policies prioritize people, their health, and their resilience in our communities. And Juan Carlos Linares, he might have taken off, but he can be the Lin-Manuel Miranda of SPARCC for today. And in his closing comment, when he said that we need to embrace each other persistently in order for SPARCC to work.
So I'm really hungry, and really hungry, so I'm going to make this really quick. Let me just say, I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the SPARCC partners, this whole day and this journey has been really inspiring and actually very humbling too. Humbling from the standpoint of the great ambition that's set out by all the different sites, humbled by the support of the funders and the partners who are all taking big steps individually and organizationally. So really, really excited. I'm going to have to run through a list of thank yous because these are really important. So first of all, thank you very much to the funders. Without your support, financial support, this would not be possible. So the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, the JPB Foundation, the California Endowment, thank you very much. This is a multi-sector effort, and there's literally an army of people doing this work, and I'm going to call them out. So I'm going to do first really fast Academy Award style. So Low Income Investment Fund, so that's Brian Prater, Craig Edelman, Lauren Valdez, Alicia Corneo, and Sam Hojo. The Enterprise Community Partners, Melinda Pollack, Devin Culbertson, Odette McLeish-White, NRDC, Shelley Patisha, Stephanie Digby, Sasha Forbes, Catherine Cox-Blair, Jillian Jock, and the Federal Reserve, myself. Did I say my name? I'm John Moon with the Federal Reserve. Okay. So Laura Choi, Naomi Citron, and Jocelyn Cousins. That's it. Okay. And now the sites, because the sites are the ones that are actually going to do the work. So let me call you out, and you're going to stand up. So Atlanta, Team Atlanta, please stand up. All right, Team Bay Area. Team Chicago. Team Denver. Team Los Angeles. Team Memphis. So as we go out into lunch, and actually as we start the journey of SPARCC, this is actually about partnerships. This is not just about the sites, but it is actually involving all of you leaders within the field so that we can work together to realize this vision that we've set out for ourselves. So with that, I was also told we're trending on Twitter. I think it was the selfie, so keep tweeting away. But with that, please join us for lunch, and please get to know the SPARCC sites. And we really, this is from our hearts, we really want to work together in this effort together. Thank you very much.